its most elite warriors, each one worth 100 normal soldiers. But even Space Marines can fall. A plasma blast tears through ceramite armor. An Orc's power claw crushes a ribcage. A Tyranid's bioweapon dissolves flesh and bone. In battles across the galaxy, Space Marines face injuries that would mean certain death for anyone else. Their enhanced biology can heal most wounds, but there are limits. There are injuries so catastrophic that even Astartes' physiology cannot repair them. Damage so extensive that no amount of time in the Apothecarian can make the warrior whole again. In most cases, such grievous wounds mean death. The apothecary extracts the fallen warrior's gene seed, the precious genetic material that will create future generations of Space Marines, and the brother is honored with funeral rites appropriate to his service. His name is added to the chapter's rolls of honor, his deeds recorded for future generations to remember and emulate. It is, by the standards of the Imperium, a good death. The warrior dies having served the Emperor, his sacrifice ensuring that the chapter continues. But for a select few, the greatest heroes of the chapter, there is another option. If even a spark of life remains, if the brain can be kept alive and the essential organs sustained, these warriors can be granted what the Imperium calls eternal service. They are interred within the armored sarcophagus at the heart of a dreadnought war machine, their shattered bodies connected to life support systems that will keep them alive for centuries or even millennia to come. The process is as horrific as it is sacred. What remains of the warrior's body is carefully preserved in amniotic fluids. Cybernetic connections are installed directly into the brain and nervous system. The sarcophagus becomes both tomb and womb, a sealed environment that sustains the fragments of flesh that once comprised a mighty warrior. When installed within a dreadnought chassis, these connections allow the entombed Marine to control the massive walker as if it were his own body, to see through its optical sensors, to fire its weapons with thought alone. From the outside, a dreadnought is an imposing sight. Standing 3 to 4 times the height of a Space Marine, these walkers are mobile fortresses, bristling with enough firepower to level buildings. They stride across battlefields with mechanical precision, their weapons systems capable of engaging anything from massed infantry to enemy armor. The chassis itself is heavily armored, able to withstand punishment that would destroy a main battle tank. In terms of pure combat effectiveness, a dreadnought is worth a full squad of Space Marines or more. But this combat effectiveness comes at a terrible price, one that only becomes apparent when you understand what existence is like for the warrior sealed within that armored shell. Imagine for a moment what it means to have your physical form reduced to a few fragments kept alive by machines. You no longer have hands to feel with, feet to walk on, a face to express emotion. All of your natural senses are gone, replaced by mechanical approximations that feed data directly into your brain. You see through targeting arrays and optical sensors, each view filtered and processed by machine spirits before it reaches your consciousness. You hear through acoustic sensors that reduce the rich complexity of sound to electronic signals. Touch becomes nothing more than pressure readings on armor plates. You cannot eat, cannot drink, cannot smell the air, or feel the sun on your skin. All the small pleasures that make life bearable are gone. There is only the amniotic fluid surrounding what remains of your body, the constant mechanical hum of the systems keeping you alive, and the darkness of the sarcophagus when the dreadnought is not activated. This is your existence now, and it will continue for as long as your brain continues to function and the chapter has need of your service. For most dreadnoughts, this service extends across centuries. The oldest dreadnoughts have served for millennia, awakened time and again across thousands of years to fight battles that span the length and breadth of the galaxy. Between these periods of activation, they sleep in stasis, their consciousness suppressed to prevent the psychological damage that constant awareness would inflict. Even with these periods of enforced slumber, the toll on the mind is immense. Extended neural interface with a vehicle as large and complex as a dreadnought causes conditions that the Imperium's medici have documented but cannot prevent. Lethargy, confusion, dyschronometria, where the perception of time becomes distorted, and eventually various forms of senility. The longer a warrior remains entombed, the more their mind begins to deteriorate, eroded by the sheer unnaturalness of their existence. But it's not just the mechanical aspects of the existence that wear on the entombed warriors. It's the isolation, the slow realization that they are becoming separated from everything they once knew. With each awakening, the faces around them are different. The brothers they fought beside are dead, their successors now serving in their places. The chapter's traditions evolve, tactics change, even the language subtly shifts across the centuries. The dreadnought awakens to find himself increasingly out of place in his own chapter, a relic from a bygone era struggling to relate to warriors who see him as a legend rather than a battle brother. This is perhaps the cruelest aspect of dreadnought existence. The warrior is granted what appears to be immortality, the chance to serve the Emperor across centuries that normal humans cannot conceive. But it is an immortality without companionship, without the bonds of brotherhood that sustained him through his mortal years. He becomes a living ghost, a remnant from the past, honored by those who cannot truly understand him. The oldest dreadnoughts, those who have served since the Great Crusade and the Horus Heresy, have experienced this isolation magnified 1,000-fold. They have been awake and asleep across 10,000 years of Imperial history. Every single person they once knew is long dead. The Imperium itself has transformed beyond recognition, the bright hope of the Great Crusade replaced by the grim darkness of the 41st millennium. These ancient warriors are strangers in their own time, living artifacts whose memories stretch back to an age that exists now only in legend and heavily censored historical records. Consider Bjorn the Fell-Handed, the most famous of all ancient dreadnoughts. He fought alongside Leman Russ during the Great Crusade, stood in the presence of the Emperor himself, participated in some of the most significant battles of the Horus Heresy, and served as the first Great Wolf of the Space Wolves chapter after Russ's disappearance. He has been serving in his dreadnought chassis for over 10,000 years, awakened periodically to lend his wisdom and martial might to his chapter's most desperate hours. Bjorn is revered by the Space Wolves beyond measure. Once per century, he is awakened so that he can recount tales of Leman Russ and the earliest days of the chapter. The assembled Space Wolves gather in absolute silence to hear his words, treating every utterance as sacred scripture. To them, Bjorn is a living connection to their Primarch, the only being left in the galaxy who can speak with first-hand knowledge of what the Wolf King was truly like. And yet, Bjorn's accounts have grown increasingly terse over the millennia. Where once he might have regaled his battle brothers with detailed stories, now he speaks in broad strokes, hitting the key points but lacking the rich detail that would make the past come alive. Some accounts suggest he has grown deliberately evasive when pressed for the personal details about Russ, offering tactical assessments and strategic observations, but deflecting questions about the Primarch's personality or private moments. This pattern appears across other ancient dreadnoughts as well. The handful of Blood Angels who remember Sanguinius speak of his tactical brilliance and his prowess in battle, but they don't describe the man himself in any real detail. Iron Hands ancients who served under Ferrus Manus recount his legendary strength and his skill with technology, but the personal details remain frustratingly absent. Even among traitor legions, the oldest dreadnoughts who remember their Primarchs before the fall are reluctant to provide complete accounts of what these beings were truly like. For the chapters that maintain these ancient dreadnoughts, this reluctance creates a frustrating gap in their historical understanding. They possess warriors who lived through the most significant period in Imperial history, who fought alongside demigods, who witnessed events that shaped the entire galaxy. And yet these warriors, for reasons they rarely articulate clearly, refuse to provide the full picture of what they experienced. Demigods walking among men, the true nature of the Primarchs. To understand the ancients' reluctance, we need to grasp what the Primarchs actually were, not as the Imperium portrays them in its propaganda and official histories, but as beings who existed in physical reality among the warriors who served them. The Primarchs were the Emperor's greatest creation, 20 genetically engineered sons designed to lead humanity's reconquest of the galaxy. The Emperor of mankind, already a being of such immense power and presence that few could look upon him directly, poured everything he knew about genetics, warpcraft, and the fundamental nature of life itself into creating these superhuman generals. Each Primarch was intended to embody specific aspects of the Emperor's own capabilities, to be not just leaders of men, but living weapons capable of turning the tide of entire wars through their mere presence. When we talk about what the Primarchs were like, we have to understand that they existed on a completely different scale from even the Space Marines who served under them. A Space Marine, as impressive as he might be, is still fundamentally human in his basic nature, enhanced, certainly, psycho-conditioned to know no fear and serve without question. But underneath all the genetic modification and surgical enhancement, there remains a human core, a mind that processes experience in ways that baseline humans can understand, even if they cannot match. The Primarchs were something else entirely. They were beings who stood between humanity and divinity, possessing capabilities that pushed the boundaries of what physical matter could accomplish. Each stood roughly twice the height of a normal Space Marine, but their size was the least impressive thing about them. What truly set them apart was the sheer presence they radiated, an almost physical pressure that affected everyone in their vicinity. Multiple accounts from the Horus Heresy era describe the effect of being near a Primarch. Normal humans often found themselves unable to think clearly in their presence, overwhelmed by an instinctual urge to kneel or flee, depending on the Primarch's mood. Even Space Marines, warriors conditioned to know no fear, felt their will bend in the presence of their genetic father. It wasn't mind control exactly, but rather a natural consequence of being near a being whose very existence warped reality around them. This presence manifested differently for each Primarch, reflecting their individual nature and the specific traits the Emperor had emphasized in their creation. Sanguinius of the Blood Angels radiated such nobility and grace that even enemies hesitated to strike him down. Angron of the World Eaters projected such raw rage and violence that his mere presence could drive lesser beings to madness. Magnus the Red's psychic might was so overwhelming that weaker minds could be damaged simply by being in the same room when he was agitated. Guilliman of the Ultramarines emanated such confidence and competence that others found themselves naturally deferring to his judgment. But it wasn't just presence. The Primarchs possessed physical capabilities that seemed to defy natural law. They could fight for days without rest, process information with superhuman speed, and demonstrate strength that no amount of genetic enhancement alone could explain. Leman Russ could tear apart armored vehicles with his bare hands. Vulcan's physical resilience was such that he survived injuries that should have been instantly fatal, even to a Primarch. Lionel Johnson's combat prowess was so refined that he could defeat multiple Space Marines simultaneously without apparent effort. Their minds were equally superhuman. Guilliman could process tactical situations involving millions of soldiers across entire star systems, holding the full complexity of such engagements in his head simultaneously. Perturabo could glance at a fortress and immediately conceive of a dozen ways to breach its defenses, his mind performing calculations that would take a team of engineers days to work through. Magnus possessed psychic capabilities that exceeded most entire orders of psychers, able to navigate the warp with a certainty that others could only dream of achieving. Each Primarch was unique, possessing not just different capabilities, but fundamentally different personalities. This is crucial to understand because the Imperium's official accounts tend to flatten these differences, presenting the Primarchs as interchangeable paragons of virtue who differed only in their specific areas of expertise. The reality was far more complex. Horus Lupercal, the War Master who would eventually betray the Emperor and plunge the galaxy into civil war, was renowned for his charisma and his ability to win people to his cause. He had a gift for making each person feel valued and understood, for seeing what motivated them and appealing to those motivations. His brother Primarchs loved him, not just because he was the first recovered, or because the Emperor favored him, but because he genuinely connected with them in ways that even the Emperor often could not. This same gift for reading and manipulating people would later serve him well as he corrupted half the legions to his rebellion. Rogel Dawn of the Imperial Fists was Horus's opposite in many ways. Where Horus built relationships through charm and persuasion, Dawn commanded through absolute competence and unshakable duty. He was famously blunt to the point of tactlessness, incapable of the diplomatic niceties that came naturally to Horus. But no one questioned his loyalty or his capabilities, and the Emperor trusted him with Terra's defense because he knew Dawn would never waver, no matter how impossible the task appeared. Conrad Kersey of the Night Lords embodied the darker aspects of justice, governing through terror and exemplifying punishment. His mind was scarred by visions of the future, showing him constantly how he and everyone around him would die. This inflicted such psychological damage that by the time of the heresy, many of his brothers questioned whether he had ever truly been sane. Yet his legion's tactics of using fear as a weapon proved devastatingly effective, bringing worlds to compliance through reputation alone. Lorgar Aurelian of the Wordbearers was perhaps the most devout of all the Primarchs, constantly seeking meaning beyond the material and yearning for something to worship. His need for faith, combined with the Emperor's rejection of religion, would eventually drive him to chaos and set in motion the events that led to the Horus heresy. But before his fall, he was a thoughtful scholar and philosopher, deeply concerned with questions of meaning and purpose that his more practically minded brothers often dismissed. Each Primarch, in other words, was not just a military genius or a physical powerhouse, but a complete individual with distinct personality traits, preferences, quirks, and flaws. They argued with each other, formed friendships and rivalries, had moments of doubt and displays of ego. They were, despite their superhuman capabilities, recognizably people in ways that made them both inspiring and dangerous. For the Space Marines who served under these beings, the experience was overwhelming in ways that are difficult to convey. To stand in the presence of your Primarch was to feel the full weight of your genetic heritage made manifest. You saw in him the ultimate expression of what you could never quite become, the perfect realization of the gene seed that had been implanted in your body. The instinct to follow him, to serve him, to die for him if necessary, was coded into your very biology. You couldn't help but love him, couldn't help but see him as the absolute center of your world. This created incredibly powerful bonds between Primarchs and their legions. The Space Marines of the Lunar Wolves, later the Sons of Horus, would have followed Horus into the heart of the warp itself, because their devotion to him transcended rational thought. The Space Wolves howled for Leman Russ not because they were ordered to, but because the urge to express their connection to him was as natural as breathing. The Blood Angels revered Sanguinius with an intensity that bordered on worship, seeing in him the perfect embodiment of nobility and martial prowess. But these bonds also created tremendous vulnerability. When a Primarch fell to chaos or made catastrophic decisions, their legions followed. The Emperor's children descended into depravity because Fulgrim did. The Death Guard embraced Nurgle's corruption because Mortarion led them into it. The World Eaters became mindless berserkers because Angron's example and expectations pushed them in that direction. The bond between Primarch and Legion was so strong that it overrode individual judgment, turning entire armies of superhuman warriors into extensions of their father's will. This is the context that ancient dreadnoughts carry with them. They knew the Primarchs when these beings walked among them. They experienced firsthand the overwhelming presence, the genetic imperative to serve, the bond that transcended words or conscious thought. They saw these demigods at their finest moments and, in some cases, at their lowest. They witnessed things that the official histories can never fully capture because the emotional reality of serving a Primarch cannot be adequately conveyed through second-hand accounts. And now, 10,000 years later, they are expected to describe these experiences to Space Marines who have never known anything like it, who can barely conceive of what it meant to serve a Primarch directly. The ancients are asked to put into words something that was always beyond words, to make comprehensible an experience that fundamentally resists comprehension. Small wonder, then, that they might find the task daunting enough to avoid it altogether. The erosion of memory. When the past becomes fog. There's another factor that makes ancient dreadnoughts reluctant to speak in detail about the Primarchs, one that is perhaps more tragic than any ideological or emotional reason. Simply put, after 10,000 years entombed in a dreadnought chassis, many of them can no longer remember the details they're being asked to recount. Memory is a fragile thing, even under normal circumstances. Human beings forget details constantly, their recollections colored by emotion, distorted by time, reshaped by subsequent experiences. What we remember about any given event is not an objective recording, but a reconstruction, our brains filling in gaps and smoothing over inconsistencies to create a coherent narrative. This process happens automatically and unconsciously, which means we're often unaware of how much our memories differ from the actual events they supposedly represent. Space Marines, with their enhanced biology and psycho-conditioning, have better memory retention than baseline humans. Their recall is more precise, their ability to separate important details from irrelevant ones more refined. They can remember tactical situations with remarkable clarity, recounting exactly where each enemy unit was positioned, or precisely which orders were given at what time. Their training emphasizes this capability, because effective warfare requires learning from past engagements. But even Space Marine memory has limits, and the conditions of dreadnought existence push well beyond those limits. The problem begins with the simple passage of time. 10,000 years is an incomprehensible span for human consciousness to process. For context, 10,000 years ago from our present time, human civilization was just beginning to develop agriculture. Everything we think of as history, every empire that has risen and fallen, every cultural achievement we celebrate, all of it has occurred in less time than these ancient dreadnoughts have been serving. No biological entity, not even one enhanced to Astartes standards, is designed to maintain coherent memories across such timescales. The human brain, even when augmented by the genetic modifications that create a Space Marine, has finite storage capacity. New memories must overwrite old ones. Details fade. Events that seemed crystal clear at the time become hazy, the edges softening until only the broad outlines remain. For ancient dreadnoughts, this natural memory decay is accelerated by the conditions of their existence. Remember that they spend most of their time in stasis, their consciousness suppressed to prevent psychological damage from constant awareness. When they're awakened, it might be decades or even centuries since their last period of activity. Each awakening requires them to rebuild their sense of self, to remember who they are and what purpose they serve. This constant cycling between consciousness and enforced sleep creates additional strain on memory formation and retention. Moreover, the neural interface that connects the entombed warrior to his dreadnought chassis is not a perfect system. Extended use causes documented neurological problems. The brain begins to struggle with distinguishing between the body's natural sensory input, which no longer exists, and the machine's sensory data being fed directly into neural pathways. This creates a kind of sensory confusion that can affect memory formation. Some dreadnoughts report that their memories from before internment become increasingly dreamlike, taking on a quality that makes them wonder if they actually experienced these events or merely imagined them. The vividness fades, the certainty erodes. What once was a clear recollection of standing in the Primarch's presence becomes a general sense that it happened, with the specific details having faded into fog. The oldest dreadnoughts, those who have served since the Horus Heresy, have been dealing with these effects for millennia. Bjorn the Fell-Handed has been entombed for over 10,000 years. During that time, he has been awakened hundreds of times for battles and ceremonial occasions. With each awakening, he is expected to remember events that for him now lie buried under 10 millennia of subsequent experience. Think about what that means. The Battle of Prospero, where Bjorn lost his arm fighting against the Thousand Sons, happened 10,000 years ago. The last time Bjorn saw Leman Russ, when the Primarch departed into the Eye of Terror, happened roughly 9,700 years ago. For Bjorn, these events are separated from his present awareness by a gulf of time so vast that even his enhanced Space Marine memory cannot fully bridge it. Lore accounts suggest that Bjorn's memories of Leman Russ have degraded over the millennia. Where once he could recount specific conversations, describe the exact timbre of Russ's voice, recall the little details that made his Primarch human despite his superhuman nature, now Bjorn speaks in broader terms. He remembers the Primarch's leadership style, his tactical preferences, his general demeanor, but the intimate details, the things that would make Leman Russ feel like a real person rather than a mythological figure, those have faded with time. This is not because Bjorn doesn't care or because he's deliberately withholding information. It's simply because his brain, despite all its enhancement and despite the best preservation technology the Adeptus Mechanicus can provide, cannot perfectly maintain memories across 10,000 years of existence. The details have been worn away by time, like words carved into stone gradually eroded by wind and rain until only fragments remain legible. Other ancient dreadnoughts face similar challenges. The few Blood Angels ancients who remember Sanguinius find their recollections growing increasingly impressionistic. They remember the feeling of being in his presence, the overwhelming sense of nobility and perfection he radiated. But specific moments, individual conversations, the small details that would humanize their Primarch, these have become difficult to pin down with certainty. There's another factor at play as well. The longer a warrior remains in a dreadnought, the more their personality begins to change. The constant interface with machine systems, the lack of normal human sensory input, the cycles of sleep and waking across centuries, all of these affect who they are at a fundamental level. The person they were when first interred is not quite the same person who wakes 10,000 years later. This gradual transformation affects memory in insidious ways. As the dreadnought's personality shifts, they may lose connection to memories that were tied to their earlier self. Events that once held deep emotional significance may become distant, viewed as if they happened to someone else. The Space Marine who stood in awe of his Primarch gradually becomes the Ancient, whose perspective has been reshaped by millennia of service, and in that transformation, some of the emotional immediacy of those early memories is inevitably lost. Some accounts suggest that certain dreadnoughts actively feel their memories fading and find the experience deeply distressing. They know they once knew more than they can now recall. They're aware that important details have slipped away, but they cannot recover them no matter how hard they try. This awareness of memory loss creates its own form of grief, a mourning for a past that they can no longer fully access. Imagine being Bjorn, awakened for the 1,000th time to recount stories of Leman Russ to eager young space wolves. You know you were there, you remember being there. But when you reach for the specific details, all you find are broad outlines and general impressions. You can describe what Russ looked like, his general demeanor, the kinds of things he typically said. But the vividness is gone. The conversation you're certain you had with him after a particular battle has become a blur of possible words that might have been said. The gesture you're sure he made, some characteristic motion that was uniquely his, you can no longer quite visualize it clearly. And the young space wolves look at you with such hope and expectation. hungry for details that will make their legendary Primarch feel real to them. They want to know what his laugh sounded like, what jokes he told, how he acted when no one important was watching. They want the human details that would transform Russ from a figure of legend into a person they could have known. But you can't give them what they want, because those details have faded from your mind, like morning mist burned away by the sun. You know you once knew these things. You're certain they existed, but they're gone now, eroded by time and the conditions of your existence. And no amount of desire or effort can bring them back. So instead, you give them what you can. You speak of Russ's tactical genius, his preference for close quarters combat, his loyalty to the Emperor. You provide the historical facts and strategic observations that your military memory has retained. But the personal details, the things that would truly answer their questions, those are lost to you now. This is one reason why ancient dreadnoughts might be reluctant to speak extensively about their Primarchs. They're aware of the gaps in their memory. They know their recollections are incomplete. And rather than admit to this incompleteness, rather than disappoint their battle brothers by revealing how much has been lost to time, they simply avoid the conversation altogether. Better to be thought mysterious or protective of sacred memories than to admit that those memories have degraded beyond reliable recovery. The tragedy is that even this reluctance is temporary. Eventually, given enough time, even the awareness that memories are missing will fade. The ancient will remember that he once knew the Primarch, but will have no sense that anything important has been lost. The gaps will no longer bother him, because he won't remember that they're gaps. What remains will feel complete, even though it represents only a fraction of what he once knew. This is the endpoint that all ancient dreadnoughts march toward. Not death, which would be a mercy, but a gradual fading of everything that made them who they were, until only the barest outline of their original self remains. They become walking databases of tactical information, their memories of personal connections and emotional experiences gradually eroded away until only military knowledge persists. And this process affects their memories of the Primarchs most severely, because those memories are tied so intimately to emotion and personal experience. The tactical lessons learned from serving under a Primarch can be abstracted and preserved. But what it felt like to be in that Primarch's presence, the unique characteristics that made him different from his brothers, the small human moments that showed his personality, these are exactly the kind of memories that fade first. The weight of betrayal, wounds that cannot heal. But there's something even darker lurking beneath the surface, something that makes many ancient dreadnoughts even more reluctant to speak freely about the Primarchs. It's not just the passage of time or the degradation of memory. It's the wound that was inflicted during the Horus heresy itself, a trauma so profound that 10,000 years has not been enough to heal it. To understand this trauma, we need to talk about what the Horus heresy actually meant for the Space Marines who lived through it. The official histories present it as a great betrayal, certainly, but they present it in abstract terms. Half the legions turned traitor. Brother fought brother. The Imperium was nearly destroyed. These statements convey the scale of the conflict, but not its emotional reality for those who experienced it. For the Space Marines who remained loyal, the heresy was the complete destruction of everything they thought they understood about the universe. Remember that these warriors had been created to serve the Primarchs. Their entire existence revolved around their genetic connection to their father. The bond between Primarch and Legion was deeper than mere loyalty or duty. It was written into their very cells, an imperative as fundamental as breathing. And then, without warning, half of those Primarchs turned against the Emperor. The beings these warriors had been literally designed to love and obey revealed themselves to be traitors. Worse, they commanded their legions to follow them into damnation. And most of those legions obeyed without question, because the imperative to serve their Primarch overwhelmed any other consideration. But not all of them obeyed. In each traitor legion, There were warriors who remained loyal to the Emperor, despite the genetic imperative pulling them toward their Primarch. These were the ones who found themselves on Istvan III, betrayed by their own legion, fighting desperately against brothers they had served alongside for decades. These were the ones who experienced the heresy not as an abstract political conflict, but as a deeply personal betrayal that shattered their entire understanding of themselves. The ancient dreadnoughts who survived this period carry those wounds still. They remember what it was like to love their Primarch with every fiber of their being, to serve him with absolute devotion, to believe that this bond was sacred and eternal. And then they remember the moment when that belief was revealed to be a lie, when their Primarch showed himself to be something other than what they had believed, when the foundation of their entire existence cracked beneath them. For the loyalist ancients who served under traitor Primarchs, this trauma is even more acute. Consider Rillanor, the Ancient of Rights of the Emperor's Children, one of the most famous examples of this phenomenon. Rillanor served Fulgrim for decades, fighting in countless battles, upholding the ideals of perfection that the Third Legion had always embodied. He was one of the first to bear the Palatine Aquila, a mark of honor that showed him to be among the most respected warriors in the entire Legion. Then came Istvan III, when Fulgrim revealed his betrayal and ordered the loyal elements of his legion to be purged. Rillanor survived the initial virus bombing and fought on alongside other loyalists against impossible odds. He watched his brothers die, killed by other brothers who wore the same colors and served the same Primarch. The perfection he had believed in was revealed to be a mask for corruption and depravity. Rillanor survived, trapped in the ruins of Istvan III for 10,000 years, his dreadnought chassis damaged, his mobility limited, alone in the dark, with nothing but his rage and his grief. When Fulgrim finally returned to the planet millennia later, Rillanor attempted to destroy his former Primarch with a virus bomb, willing to die if it meant taking revenge for the betrayal that had destroyed everything he once held dear. The attempt failed, but Rylanor's defiance in the face of his corrupted gene-sire became legendary. Even a group of 1,000 Sons sorcerers who had accompanied Fulgrim were moved by the Ancient's unwavering loyalty, choosing in that moment to honor his sacrifice rather than continue serving their own corrupted cause. Rillanor died, finally, after 10,000 years of waiting, having spit his rejection of Fulgrim directly into the demon Primarch's face. Rillanor's story is extreme, but it illustrates the depth of trauma that the heresy inflicted on those who lived through it. For 10,000 years, he carried the wound of Fulgrim's betrayal, unable to process it, unable to move past it, defined utterly by that moment when everything he believed in was destroyed. And Rillanor was not unique. There are other ancients scattered across loyal chapters who carry similar wounds, warriors who remember what it was like to believe in a Primarch absolutely, and then have that belief shattered. But the trauma extends beyond just the warriors who served under traitor Primarchs. Even those who served under loyal Primarchs carry wounds from the heresy. They remember fighting against Space Marines who looked just like them, who shared the same training and doctrine, who were brothers in every way that mattered except loyalty. They remember the horror of battles where every enemy killed was not an alien monster or a chaos cultist, but another Space Marine, another son of the Emperor who had chosen the wrong side or been on the wrong legion when the Primarchs declared for Horus. They remember Primarchs fighting each other, those demigod beings who were supposed to be leading humanity to a glorious future, instead trying to kill one another. They saw Fulgrim murder Ferrus Manus, one Primarch personally executing another. They witnessed the corruption and transformation of beings who should have been incorruptible, watched as warriors and leaders they had revered descended into depths of depravity that defied comprehension. For ancient dreadnoughts who remember the Great Crusade, this represents a complete inversion of everything they thought they were fighting for. During the Crusade, the purpose was clear: unite humanity, bring the lost worlds back into the imperial fold. destroy the alien and the mutant, create a galaxy where humanity could thrive under the Emperor's guidance. The Primarchs were the instruments of this great work, each leading their legion to glorious victories that brought the dream of human unity closer to reality. Then the heresy turned all of it into a nightmare. The unity fractured. The Primarchs revealed themselves to be as fallible and corruptible as anyone else. The great work of the Crusade ground to a halt as the Imperium turned its weapons on itself. And in the end, the Emperor himself was struck down, not by some external enemy, but by his most beloved son, forced to sit upon the golden throne for eternity, a living corpse sustaining the Astronomicon through constant agony. The ancients remember all of this. They remember believing in the Great Crusade's promise. They remember the hope and purpose that drove them forward during those early campaigns. And they remember watching it all collapse, seeing the dream die and be replaced by the grim reality of an Imperium that survives through sheer stubbornness rather than any grand vision of the future. This is why asking them to describe what the Primarchs were really like is such a fraught request. To answer honestly would require them to acknowledge the full complexity of these beings, including their flaws and weaknesses. It would require admitting that the demigods they served were capable of catastrophic errors in judgment, of pride so overwhelming that it blinded them to obvious manipulation, of personal grudges and petty jealousies that influenced decisions affecting billions of lives. For an ancient who survived the heresy by maintaining absolute loyalty to the Emperor, admitting these truths about the Primarchs feels dangerous. It feels like betraying them all over again, like giving aid to the traitors by acknowledging that even the loyal Primarchs were flawed beings who made mistakes. Better to maintain the official narrative, to speak only of their virtues and accomplishments, to present them as the paragons that the Imperium needs them to be, rather than the complicated, sometimes contradictory individuals they actually were. Moreover, for ancients who served under traitor Primarchs and survived by rejecting that service, the wounds go even deeper. To describe what Fulgrim or Horus or any of the traitor Primarchs were really like before their fall would require acknowledging that these beings were not always monsters. They were, at one point, genuinely noble and worthy of service. Fulgrim really did embody perfection, before corruption twisted that ideal into something obscene. Horus really was the most charismatic and capable of all the Primarchs, before ambition and chaos turned him into a monster. Acknowledging this creates an impossible tension. If the traitor Primarchs were once truly worthy of devotion, then the genetic imperative to serve them was not misplaced. The loyalty those ancients felt was not foolish or wrong, but an appropriate response to beings who deserved that loyalty. Which means the betrayal becomes even more painful because it represents not just a political defection, but a fundamental corruption of something that was genuinely good. The alternative is to retroactively paint the traitor Primarchs as always having been flawed, to reinterpret their actions before the heresy as evidence of corruption that was simply not yet fully manifested. This allows the loyal warriors who survived to maintain that their current hatred of the traitors is entirely justified and always would have been. But it requires a form of historical revisionism that goes against what they actually remember. So the ancient dreadnoughts face an impossible choice when asked to describe their Primarchs honestly. They can tell the truth, acknowledging the full complexity and contradictions of these beings, and risk undermining the myths that their chapters need. Or they can simplify and sanitize, providing only the approved narrative, but at the cost of falsifying their own memories and experiences. Many choose a third option. They simply refuse to engage with the question in detail. They provide vague, general answers that satisfy the immediate inquiry without revealing anything substantial. They deflect, change the subject, or simply withdraw back into their sarcophagi, ending the conversation before it can delve too deeply into topics they would prefer not to explore. This is not cowardice. It's a form of self-preservation, a way of protecting wounds that have never fully healed. 10,000 years is apparently not long enough to recover from having your entire worldview shattered by the beings you were created to serve. The trauma remains, buried perhaps, but still present, still capable of causing pain when prodded too directly. The burden of being a legend. There's another layer to this reluctance that has less to do with the ancients themselves and more to do with how they're perceived by their chapters. Ancient dreadnoughts occupy a unique position within Space Marine culture. They are not just veterans or honored warriors. They are living relics, physical connections to a past that everyone else knows only through records and legends. This status confers tremendous respect, but also creates expectations that can be suffocating. Young Space Marines view ancient dreadnoughts with a mixture of awe and reverence that borders on worship. These are warriors who fought during the Great Crusade, who saw the Emperor with their own eyes, who served directly under the Primarchs. In the minds of younger battle brothers, the ancients represent a golden age when everything was somehow better and more pure, when the Imperium was ascendant rather than merely surviving. This idealization creates immense pressure on the ancients. They are expected to embody perfection, to represent the highest ideals of their chapter, to serve as living proof that the legends are true and that the sacrifices demanded by the Imperium are worthwhile. Every word they speak is analyzed and remembered, added to the chapter's oral tradition, potentially quoted for centuries to come. They cannot afford to be uncertain or doubtful, because doubt from a figure of such authority could undermine the faith that holds everything together. This pressure is particularly intense when it comes to the Primarchs. The Space Marines, who never knew their genetic father, have built elaborate mythologies around him, stories that give meaning and purpose to their existence. These myths are necessary. They provide the chapter with identity, with a sense of continuity across 10,000 years, with examples to emulate and ideals to uphold. Without these stories, the chapter would be just another military organization rather than a brotherhood bound by sacred bonds to a legendary father figure. The ancient dreadnoughts are expected to validate and reinforce these myths. When they speak of the Primarch, their words should confirm what the chapter already believes. The Primarch should be presented as infinitely wise, perfectly noble, absolutely dedicated to the Emperor and the Imperium. Any deviation from this narrative is not just unexpected, but potentially dangerous to the chapter's cohesion and morale. But the ancients remember a more complicated truth. They remember that Leman Russ could be boastful and crude. They remember that Rogel Dawn could be unnecessarily harsh. They remember that even Sanguinius, most beloved of all Primarchs, had moments of doubt and fear. They remember that the Primarchs were people, not statues, and that being a person means having flaws and making mistakes. Revealing these truths would not serve the chapter's needs. In fact, it might actively harm the chapter by undermining the myths that hold everything together. So the ancients face a choice. They can tell the truth as they remember it, risking damage to their chapter's morale and identity, or they can reinforce the myths, even though doing so means falsifying their own memories. Many choose to reinforce the myths, at least to some degree. When they speak of the Primarchs, they emphasize the positive qualities and downplay the negative ones. They describe moments of brilliance and gloss over moments of error. They present their Primarchs as the legends require them to be, rather than as they actually were. But this choice comes with a cost. Each time an ancient chooses myth over truth, he betrays his own memories a little bit. He contributes to the distortion of history, ensuring that future generations will know the legend but not the reality. And he reinforces the gap between what he knows and what he's allowed to say, a gap that can grow increasingly uncomfortable over time. Some ancients handle this tension by becoming increasingly taciturn. They speak only when absolutely necessary, offering minimal details, refusing to elaborate even when pressed. This allows them to fulfill their role as chapter legends without having to actively participate in the falsification of history. They neither confirm nor deny the myths. They simply exist, their continued survival serving as proof that the past was real, even if the details remain deliberately vague. Others take a different approach, becoming storytellers who carefully craft their narratives to serve specific purposes. They know which stories the chapter needs to hear, which examples will inspire the current generation, which lessons from the past apply to present challenges. They become selective historians, choosing what to reveal and what to withhold based on what will best serve the chapter's interests, rather than what most accurately reflects the historical truth. Both approaches require the ancient to maintain a careful distance between his actual memories and what he presents to his battle brothers. He must constantly evaluate whether a given detail should be shared or withheld, whether a particular story serves the chapter's needs or might undermine its cohesion. This constant self-censorship is exhausting, adding another burden to an existence already defined by isolation and the slow erosion of identity. The youngest Space Marines, eager for details about their Primarch, often don't understand why the ancients are so careful with their words. They assume the hesitation reflects the sacred nature of the memories being protected, that the ancients are simply being appropriately reverent when discussing beings who were more than human. They don't realize that the hesitation might reflect something more complicated, a tension between truth and myth that the ancient can never fully resolve. This misunderstanding creates a kind of tragedy in its own right. The young warriors so desperately want to know their Primarch, to understand what he was truly like, to feel some connection to this legendary figure who defines their chapter's identity. And the ancient wants to give them that connection, wants to share memories that might bring their father to life in their minds. But he cannot do so honestly without risking the destruction of myths that the chapter needs to survive. So instead, the ancient provides carefully curated information. He speaks in generalities and approved narratives. He offers tactical observations and strategic lessons while avoiding personal details. He becomes a disappointing source of information precisely because he's trying to protect his battle brothers from truths they're not ready to handle. The chapter, in turn, interprets this reticence as appropriate reverence. The official position becomes that the ancients' memories of the Primarch are too sacred to be casually discussed, that these experiences belong to a golden age that current warriors can aspire to but never fully understand. This interpretation allows everyone to save face. The ancient doesn't have to admit that he's actively censoring his own memories, and the chapter doesn't have to confront the possibility that its beloved myths might be distortions of a more complicated truth. But underneath this comfortable arrangement lies a fundamental dishonesty that eats away at the ancient sense of self. He knows what he's doing. He's aware that he's contributing to a false narrative, and each time he does so, he drives another wedge between who he actually was and who the chapter needs him to be. Over millennia, this gap can become so wide that the ancient himself begins to lose track of where the truth ends and the myth begins. The institutional need for perfect legends. The reluctance of ancient dreadnoughts to speak honestly about the Primarchs isn't just a personal choice or a response to individual trauma. It's also, in many ways, something that the Imperium itself actively encourages. The institutions that govern Space Marine chapters have a vested interest in maintaining simplified, heroic narratives about the Primarchs, and they exert subtle but persistent pressure on the ancients to conform to these narratives. Consider how Space Marine chapters function as organizations. They are not just military units, but also keepers of tradition, custodians of their own history, and guardians of their Primarch's legacy. Everything they do is filtered through the lens of what would our father want? Their combat doctrine, their recruitment practices, their internal rituals, all of these are justified by reference to the Primarch's supposed preferences and values. For this system to work effectively, the Primarch's image must remain consistent and clear. He must represent specific virtues, embody particular ideals, serve as an unambiguous example for his sons to follow. Any complexity or contradiction in that image creates doctrinal confusion that can cascade through the entire chapter. If the Space Wolves were to learn that Leman Russ actually had serious doubts about some of the Emperor's orders during the Great Crusade, it might lead them to question their own doctrine of absolute loyalty. If the Imperial Fists discovered that Rogel Dawn sometimes made strategic errors despite his legendary competence, it might undermine their confidence in their own judgment. If the Blood Angels learned that Sanguinius struggled more deeply with his martial rage than official accounts suggest, it might make them question whether their own efforts at self-control are futile. The institutional leadership of each chapter understands this dynamic. The chapter masters, chaplains, and librarians who shape doctrine and maintain tradition have a responsibility to preserve the chapter's identity across centuries. They know that this identity depends on maintaining a particular image of their Primarch, one that serves the chapter's operational and spiritual needs, rather than necessarily reflecting historical accuracy. This creates a situation where ancient dreadnoughts, who remember the Primarchs, directly find themselves under institutional pressure to conform to approved narratives. The pressure is rarely overt. No one outright tells an ancient that he must lie about his memories. But the expectations are clear. When an ancient speaks about the Primarch, his words should reinforce doctrine, should inspire the current generation, should align with the chapter's understanding of its own identity and purpose. Ancients who deviate from these expectations often find themselves politely but firmly corrected. Their stories are reinterpreted by chaplains to align with approved doctrine. Their words are quoted selectively, with any problematic elements quietly omitted. If an ancient becomes particularly troublesome, persistently offering accounts that contradict official narratives, he might find himself awakened less frequently. His counsel sought only for tactical matters, rather than historical questions. This institutional pressure is perhaps strongest in chapters that maintain particularly rigid or idealized views of their Primarch. The Ultramarines, for instance, revere Robert Guilliman as the model of strategic genius and administrative competence. Their entire identity is built around the Codex Astartes, Guilliman's great work, defining how Space Marines should organize and fight. Any suggestion that Guilliman might have had significant flaws or made serious mistakes could undermine the Codex's authority and, by extension, the chapter's entire operational philosophy. The Dark Angels face an even more extreme version of this dynamic because of the secret they guard so carefully. The fact that a portion of their legion fell to chaos during the heresy is knowledge restricted to the chapter's inner circle. Ancient dreadnoughts who remember those events are caught between their memories of what actually happened and the approved narrative that must be maintained at all costs. They cannot speak honestly about that period of their history without revealing secrets that could destroy the chapter's reputation if they became widely known. In some cases, this institutional pressure extends to physically preventing ancients from speaking freely. Dreadnoughts are awakened by tech priests under the direction of chapter leadership. If the leadership decides that a particular ancient's recollections are becoming problematic, they can simply choose not to wake him. He remains in stasis, his inconvenient memories safely locked away, while younger ancients whose accounts align better with current doctrine are awakened instead. The tragedy is that this institutional pressure often aligns with the ancient's own reluctance to share difficult truths. The ancient doesn't want to undermine his chapter's morale by revealing his Primarch's flaws. The chapter leadership doesn't want those flaws revealed because of the potential damage to doctrine and cohesion. So both parties collaborate, perhaps unconsciously, in maintaining a narrative that neither fully believes, but that serves everyone's immediate needs. This creates a situation where the truest accounts of what the Primarchs were actually like are systematically suppressed, not through any conscious conspiracy, but through the combined effect of individual reluctance and institutional pressure. The Space Marines who actually knew the Primarchs carry memories that would complicate or contradict approved narratives, but they're incentivized at every level not to share those memories in full detail. The result is a gradual distortion of history. With each generation that passes, the Primarchs become slightly less real and slightly more legendary. The complex, contradictory individuals who actually led the legions during the Great Crusade are replaced by simplified archetypes that serve specific doctrinal purposes. Leman Russ becomes nothing more than the loyal warrior. Sanguinius becomes pure nobility. Guilliman becomes absolute competence. The messy reality of who these beings actually were gets buried under layers of institutional narrative that serve the Imperium's needs but betray historical truth. The ancient dreadnoughts watch this process happen and are powerless to stop it. They know what's being lost. They understand that future generations will inherit myths rather than history. But they also understand why this is happening and why, in the grim darkness of the 41st millennium, mythical Primarchs might serve humanity better than accurate ones. This understanding doesn't make the situation any less tragic. If anything, it makes it more so. The ancients are complicit in the erasure of truth, but they're complicit because the truth would serve no one's interests. They carry memories that might illuminate the past, but sharing those memories would damage the present. So they remain silent, or nearly so, and the gap between historical reality and imperial myth continues to widen. What they remember versus what they've lost. One of the most fascinating and tragic aspects of ancient dreadnoughts, reluctance to describe the Primarchs, is the disconnect between the kinds of information they can reliably recall and the kinds of details that would actually answer the questions their younger battle brothers are asking. Dreadnoughts, by their very nature, preserve certain types of information better than others. Their neural interfaces and memory enhancement systems are optimized for tactical and strategic data. They can recall battlefield dispositions with perfect clarity, remember exactly which enemy units were deployed where, recite weapons specifications and armor values without hesitation. Their military memory is exceptional, maintained at a high level of fidelity, even across millennia, because this information is constantly reinforced through repeated use. What fades more quickly are the personal details, the emotional content, the small human moments that don't directly relate to warfare. The sound of someone's laughter, the specific words used in a casual conversation, the way someone moved when they were relaxed rather than in combat. These details require a kind of memory that the dreadnought systems aren't designed to preserve because they have no tactical value. This creates a frustrating situation where an ancient can describe in exquisite detail how Leman Russ deployed his forces during a particular battle, what tactics he employed, how he adapted to changing circumstances on the battlefield, but cannot quite remember what Russ's voice sounded like during a quiet moment in the command tent afterward. The tactical memory persists, while the personal memory fades, leaving a lopsided account that answers some questions while leaving others frustratingly unresolved. For young Space Marines seeking to understand their Primarch, this is exactly backward from what they want. They already have access to tactical reports and strategic analyses. The chapter archives are full of documents describing how their Primarch fought, what strategies he preferred, which battles he won, and how. What they're missing are the personal details that would make their Primarch feel like a real person, rather than a collection of tactical doctrines. They want to know, did he have a sense of humor? What made him laugh? What made him angry? How did he treat his sons when they failed at a task? What were his private concerns and fears? Did he have friends among his brother Primarchs? What did he do during the rare moments when he wasn't planning campaigns or leading battles? These are precisely the kinds of questions that ancient dreadnoughts are least equipped to answer, not because they weren't present for such moments, but because the memory systems that sustain them don't preserve that type of information effectively. An ancient might have clear memories of serving on Leman Russ's personal guard during the heresy, might remember every battle they fought together with tactical precision. but the informal conversations during transit between battles, the jokes shared over maintenance of weapons, the small gestures that revealed Russ's personality, these have faded into vague impressions rather than concrete recollections. This degradation of personal memory, while tactical memory persists, creates another reason for ancients to be reluctant when asked about their primarchs. They're aware of the gaps in their recollection. They know they once knew the answers to these questions, but can no longer access that information reliably. Rather than admit to this memory loss, rather than disappoint their battle brothers by revealing how much has been forgotten, many ancients choose to deflect the questions entirely, or provide only the tactical information they can recall with confidence. Moreover, even when personal memories do persist, they often exist in a degraded state that makes the ancient uncertain about their accuracy. He might remember that Leman Russ told a joke after a particular battle, might even have a general sense of what the joke was about, but cannot quite recall the specific words or the exact context. He knows the memory is real, but also knows it's incomplete, and he's uncertain whether filling in the gaps with speculation would be honoring the truth or distorting it further. This uncertainty creates a paralyzing effect. If the ancient can't remember something clearly and completely, should he share the partial memory he does have? Would that partial account serve any useful purpose? Or would it just create more questions that he cannot answer? Is it better to provide a fragmentary recollection or to simply admit that the information has been lost to time? Different ancients handle this dilemma differently. Some choose to share what they can remember, explicitly acknowledging the gaps and uncertainties in their recollection. These ancients might say something like, "I remember the Primarch speaking about honor after we took that fortress, but I cannot recall his exact words, only that he seemed proud of how we had conducted ourselves." This approach has the virtue of honesty, but often leaves the questioners unsatisfied because it raises as many questions as it answers. Other ancients take a more conservative approach, refusing to share any memory they cannot recall with absolute clarity. They reason that fragmentary or uncertain recollections do more harm than good, creating false impressions or propagating errors that will be repeated by future generations. Better to admit ignorance than to risk spreading inaccurate information about beings as important as the Primarchs. Neither approach fully satisfies the younger Space Marines seeking understanding of their Primarch. The first provides tantalizing glimpses, but lacks the detail to create a complete picture. The second maintains perfect accuracy, but at the cost of withholding potentially valuable information. Both leave the questioners feeling that there's more to know, that the ancient is holding something back, that the full truth about the Primarch remains frustratingly out of reach. There's also the problem of context degradation. Even when an ancient clearly remembers a specific incident involving the Primarch, the broader context that would make that incident meaningful might have faded. He might remember Leman Russ becoming furious after receiving a particular report, might recall the Primarch's exact words and actions in that moment, but no longer remember what the report contained or why it provoked such a strong reaction. The memory exists, but has become detached from the framework that would explain its significance. This creates situations where ancients can describe events but cannot fully explain them. A younger Space Marine asks, "Why did the Primarch react that way?" And the ancient has to admit, "I no longer remember. I know it seemed justified at the time, but the reasons have faded from my mind." This admission of gaps in understanding can be more frustrating than having no information at all, because it suggests that the knowledge once existed but has been lost. Perhaps most tragically, some ancients have lost the ability to distinguish between their own first-hand memories and accounts they heard from others. After 10,000 years of accumulated experiences and stories, the lines between direct observation and second-hand knowledge become blurred. An ancient might remember an incident involving the Primarch, but be uncertain whether he actually witnessed it or merely heard about it from battle brothers who were present. This uncertainty makes him reluctant to speak definitively about anything because he can no longer fully trust his own recall. The loneliness of immortality. Beneath all the practical and institutional reasons for ancient dreadnoughts' reluctance to discuss the Primarchs lies something more fundamental and more tragic. It's the simple fact that these warriors have outlived everything and everyone they once knew, and speaking about the past only reinforces how utterly alone they have become. Consider what it means to be Bjorn the Fell-Handed, awakened once per century to recount stories of Leman Russ to space wolves who have never known anything but the current era. When Bjorn was first interred in his dreadnought chassis, the heresy had just ended. The Imperium was still reeling from the Civil War, but was recognizably the same entity that had prosecuted the Great Crusade. Leman Russ had only recently departed, and many of the space wolves who had served directly under the Primarch were still alive and active in the chapter. Now, 10,000 years later, every single person Bjorn knew from that era is dead. Not just dead, but long dead. Their bones turned to dust millennia ago. The Imperium has transformed into something the Emperor would barely recognize. The space wolves themselves have evolved through generations of cultural drift until their traditions and practices would seem strange to the warriors Bjorn first served alongside. When Bjorn speaks of Leman Russ, he's not just recounting historical events. He's trying to communicate across a gap of experience and understanding so vast that bridging it seems almost impossible. The space wolves listening to him have grown up in an Imperium where the Emperor is a god, where the Primarchs are mythical figures, where the concept of actively campaigning to unite humanity under a secular banner would seem bizarre and possibly heretical. Everything Bjorn says must be translated through this cultural gap. He cannot simply describe what Leman Russ was like because the very framework through which he understood Russ no longer exists. The younger space wolves would hear his words but interpret them through their own understanding, shaped by 10,000 years of drift from the original context. What Bjorn means when he describes Russ's loyalty and what his listeners understand by those same words might be fundamentally different things. This communication gap creates a profound loneliness. Bjorn knows that even when he speaks truthfully and completely, his words cannot fully convey what he's trying to communicate. The experiential reality he's describing is too distant, too alien to the current age, too bound up with contexts and assumptions that no longer exist. He's trying to describe color to people who have only ever seen black and white, trying to explain the taste of a fruit that no longer grows anywhere in the galaxy. And this is true for all the ancient dreadnoughts who remember the heresy era. They carry memories of a time that might as well be mythical for all its relevance to the current age. They remember an Imperium that was different in fundamental ways, not just in its political structure, but in its entire philosophical orientation. They remember when Space Marines were soldiers rather than warrior monks, when the Emperor was a man rather than a god, when the future held promise rather than simply more of the same grinding struggle for survival. Speaking about the Primarchs forces them to confront this vast distance between past and present. Every question about what Leman Russ or Sanguinius or Rogel Dawn was really like reminds them that they are the last living links to an age that is now more legend than history. They are witnesses to a past that no one else can access, carriers of memories that will die with them because no amount of explanation can truly pass them on to warriors who have no framework for understanding them. This is perhaps why so many ancient dreadnoughts become increasingly taciturn as the millennia pass. It's not just memory degradation or institutional pressure or personal trauma, though all those factors contribute. It's the slow realization that communication has become impossible, that the gap between their experience and everyone else's is too wide to bridge with words. What's the point of trying to explain when you know your explanation will be misunderstood, filtered through assumptions and contexts that transform your meaning into something you didn't intend? Some ancients respond to this isolation by withdrawing entirely. They speak only when directly questioned, and then only in the most minimal terms possible. They fulfill their role as chapter legends and sources of tactical wisdom, but they make no effort to truly connect with the warriors around them. because such connection has become impossible. They exist in a state of permanent exile, present physically, but separated by an unbridgeable gap of time and experience. Others attempt to maintain connection by simplifying their accounts, stripping away the complexity and nuance that would be lost in translation anyway. They present simplified, archetypal versions of events and figures because these simplified versions at least have a chance of being understood correctly. Better to describe Lehman Russ as loyal and fierce in terms the current generation can comprehend than to attempt a nuanced portrait that will inevitably be misinterpreted. Neither approach eliminates the fundamental loneliness. Whether withdrawing into silence or simplifying to the point of caricature, the ancient remains isolated by his experiences. He knows things no one else knows, remembers a world no one else can imagine, carries wounds that no one else can understand. And this isolation is permanent because there is no one left who could share or validate his memories. He is the last witness, and when he finally dies, everything he remembers will be lost forever. This loneliness makes speaking about the Primarchs particularly painful, because the Primarchs represent everything the Ancient has lost. They were the center of his world, the beings around whom his entire existence revolved. His bond with his Primarch was the most important relationship he had, more significant than friendships or brotherhood, because it was written into his genetic code. And now that Primarch is gone, dead, or disappeared, or corrupted beyond recognition, and the Ancient is left trying to explain to strangers what that bond meant. It's like trying to explain what it was like to have a father to someone who never had one, and whose culture doesn't recognize the concept of paternity. The words exist, but they cannot carry the full weight of meaning. The emotional reality cannot be communicated because the listener has no experiential framework to receive it. The Ancient speaks, and his words fall into a void of incomprehension, and he's reminded once again of how completely alone he truly is, protecting future generations. There's one final reason why ancient dreadnoughts might choose to remain silent about the full reality of the Primarchs, one that is perhaps the most noble and the most heartbreaking. They are trying to protect the current generation of Space Marines from a truth they believe would do more harm than good. The Ancients understand something that younger warriors cannot fully grasp. The Imperium of the 41st millennium exists in a state of permanent crisis. Humanity is besieged on all fronts by enemies that range from incomprehensible Xenos horrors to the corrupting influence of chaos itself. The only things holding the Imperium together are faith, duty, and an unwavering conviction that the sacrifices demanded are meaningful and necessary. Space Marines are the tip of this spear, the elite warriors who fight humanity's most desperate battles. Their effectiveness depends not just on their physical capabilities and training, but on their absolute belief in their cause. They must be willing to face certain death without hesitation, to endure horrors that would break normal humans, to continue fighting even when victory seems impossible. This requires a depth of conviction that cannot afford ambiguity or doubt. The idealized image of the Primarch serves a crucial function in maintaining this conviction. When a Space Marine faces an impossible situation, he can draw strength from asking, "What would my Primarch do?" The answer provides clarity and resolve, because the Primarch, in the mythologized version that the chapter maintains, always knew the right course of action, always had the strength to do what was necessary, always embodied the virtues that the chapter holds most dear. If that image is complicated by revelations about the Primarch's flaws, doubts, mistakes, or moments of weakness, it becomes less effective as a source of inspiration and guidance. The Space Marine facing his impossible situation might find himself thinking, "My Primarch struggled with doubts too. He made mistakes that cost brothers their lives. He sometimes didn't know what to do." These thoughts, while more historically accurate, don't provide the clear direction and unwavering resolve that the mythologized version offers. Ancient dreadnoughts understand this dynamic because they've seen how it plays out across centuries. They've watched younger warriors draw strength from simplified stories about the Primarchs. They've seen how belief in an idealized father figure enables Space Marines to perform acts of heroism and sacrifice that might not be possible if they knew the full complexity of who that father figure actually was. This creates a difficult ethical question. Is it better to tell the truth and risk undermining the beliefs that enable current warriors to fulfill their duties, or to maintain the simplifications that serve the Imperium's needs, even though they distort history? Different ancients answer this question differently, but many conclude that protecting the current generation takes precedence over historical accuracy. They've seen too many Space Marines die bravely in service to myths to want to undermine those myths with inconvenient truths. They've witnessed too many moments when belief in the Primarch's perfect example provided the strength necessary to continue fighting against overwhelming odds. So they choose to protect their battle brothers from knowledge they believe would weaken rather than strengthen them. They maintain the myths not because they're dishonest, but because they believe these myths serve a greater purpose than historical accuracy. They see themselves as guardians, not just of their chapter's past, but of its future, and they're willing to sacrifice truth to preserve the faith that future generations will need to survive. This is not an easy choice. It requires the ancient to constantly evaluate what can be safely revealed and what must remain hidden. It means living with the knowledge that he's actively participating in the distortion of history. It means accepting that when he finally dies, the truth will die with him, and future generations will inherit only the myths he helped maintain. Some ancients find this acceptable, viewing it as just another sacrifice demanded by their service to the Emperor. Others struggle with the dishonesty of it, torn between their commitment to truth and their desire to protect their battle brothers. The tension between these competing values can be as painful as any physical wound, a constant gnawing awareness that they're betraying one principle to uphold another. The tragedy is compounded by the fact that the younger Space Marines, in their innocence, often make it harder rather than easier. They approach the ancients with such hope and eagerness, so desperate to understand the legendary figures who shaped their chapter's identity. They don't realize that what they're asking for, that detailed, nuanced understanding of who the Primarchs really were, might actually damage their ability to serve effectively. The ancient sees this eagerness and recognizes it as a kind of innocence that he's reluctant to destroy. These young warriors still believe the Imperium is fundamentally just, that their Primarch was fundamentally perfect, that the sacrifices they're asked to make serve a glorious purpose. The ancient knows better. He's seen how messy and complicated reality actually is. But he also knows that these younger warriors need their beliefs to survive what they'll face in service to the Emperor. So he chooses to protect them by withholding the full truth. He gives them the myths they need rather than the reality he remembers. And if this means he must bear the weight of truth alone, must carry the complexity and contradictions without being able to share them, well, that's just one more burden added to an existence already defined by sacrifice and duty. The price of eternal service. We've explored many reasons why ancient dreadnoughts are reluctant to describe what the Primarchs were really like. Memory degradation that erodes personal details while preserving tactical information. Psychological trauma from the heresy that makes honest discussion painful. Institutional pressure to maintain approved narratives. The burden of being living legends expected to embody perfection. The unbridgeable communication gap created by 10,000 years of cultural drift, and the desire to protect current generations from truths that might undermine their effectiveness. All of these factors combine to create a situation where the warriors best positioned to provide first-hand accounts of the Primarchs are the ones most reluctant to do so. The silence isn't conspiracy or simple forgetfulness. It's a complex response to an impossible situation, born from a mixture of inability, trauma, duty, and care for those who will come after. This silence represents one of the profound tragedies of the Warhammer 40,000 universe. The Imperium is desperately trying to maintain connection to its past, to remember the age when the Emperor walked among men and the Primarchs led humanity to glory. But that connection is mediated through warriors whose existence makes accurate memory increasingly impossible, whose psychological wounds make honest recounting unbearably painful, and whose circumstances incentivize myth-making over historical accuracy. The result is that with each passing century, the true nature of the Primarchs becomes more obscure. The ancient dreadnoughts who remember them directly are slowly dying, their numbers dwindling as 10,000 years of warfare takes its toll. And even those who survive are increasingly unable or unwilling to share what they know in any complete or unvarnished form. Future generations of Space Marines will inherit only fragments, stories carefully edited to serve doctrine, myths that inspire but don't necessarily inform. They'll know their Primarchs as archetypes rather than individuals, as symbols rather than people. They'll draw strength from these images because the images have been crafted to provide strength, but they'll never truly know what it was like when these beings walked among their fathers. This is what happens when you try to create immortal warriors. You succeed in preserving them physically, but you cannot preserve the context that made their memories meaningful. You create witnesses to history, but you place them in such circumstances that their testimony becomes increasingly unreliable and increasingly unbearable to deliver. You grant eternal service at the cost of the very things that make memory worth preserving. The ancient dreadnoughts understand this better than anyone. They know they're failing in their role as historical witnesses, that the myths they help maintain distort more than they illuminate, that truth is being sacrificed for the needs of the present. But they also understand why this is happening and why, perhaps, it must happen. In a galaxy as dark and terrible as the one they inhabit, sometimes myths serve humanity better than truth, and so they remain silent, or nearly so. They give tactical advice freely but personal details grudgingly. They fulfill their role as chapter legends while privately carrying the weight of everything they cannot or will not say. They are the last witnesses to an age of demigods, and they are watching their memories fade into legend even as they live. When the last ancient from the heresy era finally falls in battle, when the last warrior who stood in a Primarch's presence has his sarcophagus carried back to his chapter's halls for the final time, something irreplaceable will be lost. The door to accurate understanding of what the Primarchs were truly like will close forever. All that will remain are the myths, the legends, the carefully curated stories that serve the Imperium's needs but betray the complexity of the truth. The ancient dreadnoughts know this moment is coming. They can feel it approaching with each awakening, each battle, each time another of their number falls silent. They are the guardians of a truth that will die with them, the last links to a past that is slipping away despite all efforts to preserve it. And perhaps, in the grim darkness of the far future, where there is only war and the laughter of thirsting gods, this loss is inevitable. Perhaps accurate memory and honest testimony are luxuries that the Imperium cannot afford. Perhaps the myths that will replace truth are necessary for humanity's survival, even if they come at the cost of understanding what actually happened during the Imperium's most crucial era. But it's still a tragedy. The ancient dreadnoughts, entombed in their walking coffins, carrying memories they cannot fully share, watching the past transform into legend before their very eyes. They are living embodiments of what the Imperium has lost. Not just the Primarchs themselves, not just the promise of the Great Crusade, but the simple ability to remember honestly and speak truthfully about the beings who shaped human history. They won't tell you what the Primarchs were really like. They can't, for all the reasons we've explored. And even if they could, even if all the barriers were removed, and they were free to speak without constraint, they might choose silence anyway because some truths are too heavy to share, some wounds too deep to expose, some myths too necessary to destroy. So the next time you hear about ancient dreadnoughts being reluctant to discuss the Primarchs in detail, understand that their silence speaks volumes. It tells the story of memory lost to time, of trauma that 10,000 years hasn't healed, of duties that conflict with truth, of isolation so profound that communication becomes impossible. It tells the story of warriors who have paid the ultimate price, not death, but life extended far beyond its natural span, until they become strangers in their own time, carrying memories of people and events that no one else can truly understand. Their silence is not mysterious or enigmatic. It's simply sad, a reminder that even immortality has its limits, and that some costs of eternal service cannot be measured in battle honors or campaigns fought. The ancient dreadnoughts serve on, as they must, but they serve knowing that when they finally fall, they'll take with them truths that the galaxy will never recover. And that, perhaps, is the real price of creating warriors who cannot die. Not that they might live forever, but that they might outlive the very possibility of being understood. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the tragedy of the ancient dreadnoughts and their silence about the Primarchs, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. There are countless dark corners of the Warhammer 40k lore to explore, and your support helps us continue bringing you content that goes beyond surface-level summaries to really examine what makes this universe so compelling and tragic. Thanks for watching, and remember, in the grim darkness of the far future, even memory dies. In the grim darkness of the far future, there exist horrors beyond mortal comprehension. Among these countless terrors, few are as deeply personal, as intimately cruel, as what occurs when the green-skinned Xenos known as orcs get their crude, brutal hands on the sacred war machines of the Adeptus Astartes. Today, we explore one of the darkest fates that can befall a space marine. Not death in glorious combat, not even capture and torture by the forces of chaos, but something perhaps worse. The desecration, the violation, the transformation of one of the Ultramarines' most revered warriors, entombed within his dreadnought sarcophagus, as orc mechboys tear apart everything he once was and rebuild it into something grotesque. This is the story of what happens when orcs capture an Ultramarines' dreadnought on the worlds of Ultramar. Before we descend into the specifics of this nightmare scenario, we must first understand the players in this tragedy: the Ultramarines. Chapter of the Adeptus Astartes stands as perhaps the most famous, most exemplary of all Space Marine chapters. Sons of the Primarch Robuta Guilliman, they are the ultimate expression of order, discipline, and tactical excellence. Their realm, Ultramar, is not merely a single fortress monastery world like most chapters claim, but an entire stellar empire. Once encompassing 500 worlds during the Great Crusade, even after the Horus Heresy reduced their domain, Ultramar remains a shining beacon of imperial civilization in the eastern fringe. Within these carefully administered worlds, citizens live better lives than almost anywhere else in the Imperium. They know genuine justice, reasonable governance, and the protection of their superhuman guardians. The capital world of Macragge sits as the crown jewel of this realm, its towering mountains home to the Fortress of Hera, where the Ultramarines maintain their fortress monastery. Other worlds like Calth, with its vast underground cities built after the Wordbearers poisoned its sun during the heresy, Talassar with its violent seas, Espandor with its endless forests, and Ajax, the garden world of legendary fertility, each contribute to making Ultramar a functioning empire rather than merely a military installation. The Ultramarines take their duties as rulers seriously, viewing the governance of these worlds not as a burden, but as a sacred responsibility handed down by their Primarch through the Codex Astartes. Standing in stark contrast to this ordered, civilized realm are the Orcs. Where the Ultramarines represent humanity's highest aspirations toward discipline and excellence, orcs represent something far more primal and terrifying in their own way. They are a plague upon the galaxy, a green tide that crashes against civilized worlds with the force of an apocalypse. Genetically engineered warriors created millions of years ago by the ancient Old Ones during the War in Heaven. Orcs are living weapons that have outlived their creators and now exist for one purpose alone: war. They live to fight. They breed through spores released throughout their lives and especially at death, making them nearly impossible to truly eradicate from any world they've touched. They grow larger and stronger the more they fight, their physiology responding to success in battle by making them even more dangerous. But what makes orcs truly unique among the Xenos races is their relationship with technology and reality itself. Every orc generates a low-level psychic field, and when thousands or millions of orcs gather together, these fields combine into the Gestalt phenomenon known as the Wei-GH. This psychic resonance doesn't just make orcs recognize which among them is biggest and therefore in charge. It actually warps reality in subtle but significant ways. Orc technology, which by all rights should not function, which consists of scrap metal hammered together with no regard for actual engineering principles, somehow works because the orcs believe it should work. The Wei-Ag field fills in the gaps, makes the impossible possible, turns junk into functional weapons through sheer collective belief. Red vehicles go faster simply because orcs think they should. Guns fire when they shouldn't be able to. Armor protects when by rights it should collapse. Within orc society, certain individuals called odd boys are born with specialized instincts. The mech boys, also called mechs, possess an innate genetic understanding of engineering and construction. They don't learn how to build things through education. The knowledge simply exists in their genes, placed there by the old ones countless ages ago. A mech can look at a pile of scrap and instinctively know what each piece is and how it could be used. Give them materials and tools, and they'll start building, creating ramshackle but surprisingly effective weapons and vehicles. The best and biggest mechs become big mechs, masters of orc technology, who can create truly impressive and devastating war machines. Among the various orc clans, none epitomize the looting mentality quite like the Death Skulls. Their entire culture revolves around the acquisition of other races' technology and equipment. They're the quintessential scavengers and thieves of orc society, painting everything they own in blue, because they believe blue is lucky, and covering their acquisitions in looted symbols and icons. But the truth is that all orcs loot. It's fundamental to how they operate. After every battle, orcs swarm across the battlefield, taking everything they can carry. Weapons, armor, ammunition, food, vehicles, even buildings get dismantled and carried off. Entire orc warbands called looters specialize in grabbing the best weapons from dead enemies and getting mechs to rebuild them into shoulder-mounted gun platforms. Now imagine these two forces colliding. The ordered, disciplined Ultramarines defending their carefully maintained realm against the chaotic, barely organized but overwhelming tide of an orc. Wow! Such conflicts have occurred throughout history. Espandor itself saw a brutal orc invasion in the late 41st millennium, requiring the sacrifice of the dreadnought Barcus to ensure the survival of the Ultramarines' forces. The world of Prandium, once considered the crowning glory of Ultramar for its natural beauty, was completely stripped bare by Tyranids, but orcs too have threatened these worlds countless times. When an orc wag gains momentum, when the psychic field grows strong enough, orcs will pour forth from every corner of space, drawn to the promise of the best fighting, the biggest battles, the most glorious carnage. To understand the true horror of what we're about to discuss, we must first comprehend exactly what a dreadnought is, for it is far more than simply a weapon. It is a walking tomb. It is a prison. It is both salvation and damnation, wrapped in adamantium and ceramite. When a space marine suffers wounds so catastrophic that even the advanced medical capabilities of the chapter's apothecaries cannot save him, when his body is broken beyond repair, but some spark of life remains, the chapter faces a choice. They can grant him the Emperor's peace, a quick death, and the honor of having his gene seed harvested for the next generation. Or, if the warrior is deemed valuable enough, experienced enough, worthy enough, they can offer him a different fate. The process of interring a space marine into a dreadnought is part surgery, part religious ritual, and entirely irreversible. The dying marine's broken body is suspended in amniotic fluids within an armored sarcophagus, connected to life support systems that will sustain him indefinitely. What remains of his physical form, often little more than a torso and perhaps a head, becomes permanently wired into the dreadnought's systems through neural links and cybernetic interfaces. His senses are replaced by the machine's sensors. His limbs become weapons and power fists. His voice becomes a mechanical approximation filtered through Vox speakers. Everything that made him physically human is stripped away, leaving only consciousness trapped within a shell of metal. The Ultramarines, like all chapters, consider this interment a great honor. They tell their warriors that service will continue. They speak of how the Ancient Ones, as dreadnoughts are respectfully called, will guide future generations with their wisdom. They frame it as preservation of the chapter's greatest heroes, and in many ways, this is true. Dreadnoughts are revered. Their counsel is sought. Their presence on the battlefield inspires ordinary space marines to greater acts of heroism. When a dreadnought strides into combat, it brings the accumulated experience of centuries or even millennia. Some dreadnoughts remember the Horus Heresy itself, their memories extending back 10,000 years to the Imperium's darkest hour. But there is another side to this existence that goes unspoken in the grand ceremonies and solemn pronouncements. The pilots spend most of their time in a death-like sleep, their consciousness dimmed to preserve their sanity and extend the operational life of their biological components. When they wake, it is for war. They are roused from the darkness, their systems brought online, and they are immediately thrust into battle. There is no time for adjustment, no period of acclimatization. One moment, nothing. The next moment, sensors detecting enemy targets and tactical data streaming into their consciousness. They fight, they kill, and then they are returned to sleep. Years might pass between awakenings, decades, centuries. Each time they wake, more of their battle brothers are gone, replaced by warriors they've never met. Each time they wake, more of their humanity has eroded away, ground down by the mechanical existence they endure. The Ultramarines have always maintained strong bonds with their dreadnoughts. In a chapter that values tradition, tactical wisdom, and the teachings of the Codex Astartes, these Ancient Ones represent living links to their history. Dreadnought Barcus, before his destruction during the Orc invasion of Espandor, had served the Fourth Company with distinction for unknown centuries. Brother Ultrasius of the Second Company was interred after the Pyra Crusades in the 39th millennium and continued serving well into the 41st. Venerable dreadnoughts like Brother Agnathio survived the Battle of Calth itself, that apocalyptic betrayal during the Horus Heresy, and fought for 10,000 years afterward. Each of these warriors represents not just a weapon system, but a repository of knowledge, a teacher, a reminder of everything the chapter has endured and overcome. When an Ultramarine is placed in a dreadnought, his brothers do not forget him. His name is spoken with reverence. His deeds are remembered. The Tech Marines and Tech Marines maintain his sarcophagus with religious devotion, treating the war machine not merely as equipment, but as a shrine to a living saint. They paint it in the blue and gold of Ultramar. They adorn it with honor markings and campaign badges. They inscribe his name and his victories upon its armor. Everything about a dreadnought's appearance announces who pilots it, what they have achieved, and what they represent to the chapter. To desecrate such a machine is not merely to damage equipment. It is to violate something sacred. It is to defile the body and soul of a revered warrior who has already sacrificed everything for the Imperium. Now we must turn our attention to the darker aspects of Orc behavior, particularly their relationship with captured technology. Orcs don't simply loot for practical reasons, though the acquisition of weapons and vehicles they couldn't otherwise build serves definite practical purposes. They loot because they fundamentally cannot resist the urge. When an orc sees something interesting, something shiny, something that looks like it would be good for fighting, a deep compulsion overtakes them. They must have it. This isn't reasoned thought. It's closer to instinct, to genetic programming that drives them to acquire and adapt whatever they find. The mech boys experience this compulsion even more intensely. Where ordinary orcs might grab a gun or some armor, mech boys are drawn to complex technology. Vehicles especially fascinate them. Imperial tanks, Eldar gravcraft, Tau battlesuits, even Tyranid bioconstructs, all of these trigger the mech's engineering instincts. They'll spend hours, even days, taking apart a captured machine to understand how it works. Except they don't understand how it works, not really. Their genetic memory tells them what parts do, tells them how to connect things, but they don't comprehend the underlying principles. They operate on pure instinct, backed up by the psychic field of the Wei Gi, which makes their impossible contraptions function despite all logic. When orcs modify looted equipment, they follow certain patterns that reveal their priorities and aesthetic preferences. First, everything must be made more orky. This means bigger, louder, and covered in crude modifications. They weld metal plates onto armor, not because the vehicle needs more protection, but because more metal makes it look tougher. They bolt on additional weapons, stacking guns on top of guns until the whole thing bristles with firepower. Doesn't matter if the aiming mechanisms are ruined, or if the added weight makes it nearly impossible to move. More guns equals more dakka, and more dakka is always better. They add spikes, chains, and jagged edges because these make the vehicle look mean. They paint everything, usually red for speed, but other colors have their own properties according to orc belief. Blue is lucky, yellow makes explosions bigger, purple makes things sneaky because nobody has ever seen a purple orc. Black is tough and harder to kill. The process is violent, chaotic, and completely disrespectful of the original design. Mech boys don't carefully preserve functionality while adding their modifications. They tear off bits they don't understand or don't like. They weld new components directly onto critical systems. They rip out the original power source and jam in something that probably shouldn't work but does, because the Wei field makes it work. Gretchen assistants, small goblinoid creatures that serve orcs as laborers and cannon fodder, swarm over the project, following barked orders from the mech, stealing parts from each other, occasionally getting crushed or incinerated when something goes wrong. The whole workshop echoes with the sounds of hammering, welding, shouting, and periodic explosions. For Imperial Guard vehicles, this process is relatively straightforward, if horrific to witness. A Lehman Russ tank, workhorse of the Imperial military, becomes a looted wagon. Out come the carefully calibrated targeting systems, replaced, with a crude gun mount that works through brute force and the Wei field. Off comes the camouflage paint, replaced with garish red and yellow. On go the spikes, the rams, the additional armor plates. The original crew compartment gets modified to fit orc physiology, which usually means tearing out seats and controls, since orcs don't need such luxuries. Within days or even hours, depending on how many mechs and grots are working, the tank no longer resembles its original form. It's still recognizable as having once been a Lehman Russ, but now it's something else, something crude, something that screams its new allegiance to anyone who sees it. But Space Marine equipment represents a different challenge entirely. Astartes wargear is not mass-produced like Imperial Guard equipment. Each piece is a work of craftsmanship, blessed by the Mechanicus, inscribed with prayers and purity seals. The materials alone are far superior to standard Imperial equipment. Ceramite armor, adamantium structural components, advanced power sources that have sustained war machines for thousands of years. The machine spirits that the Mechanicus believes inhabit all technology are particularly strong in Space Marine equipment. From an Orc perspective, this means the loot is even better. From a practical standpoint, it means the equipment is more resistant to their modifications, though this never stops them from trying. Space Marine vehicles rarely fall into Orc hands intact simply because Space Marines rarely lose battles so catastrophically that they abandon functioning equipment. When a Rhino transport or a Predator tank falls to enemy fire, the Space Marines typically recover it after the battle, or destroy it themselves if recovery proves impossible. The chapter simply cannot allow sacred war gear to be captured, but in the chaos of battle, especially against overwhelming numbers, even Space Marines can be forced into full retreat. Equipment gets left behind. Damaged vehicles that would normally be towed to safety are instead abandoned in the desperate need to preserve the chapter's most valuable resource, the Space Marines themselves. And when Orcs overwhelm a Space Marine position, when the green tide finally crashes over defenses that have held for hours or days, they don't take prisoners and they don't show mercy. They kill and they loot, in that order, or sometimes simultaneously. Dreadnoughts occupy a special place in this grim calculus. When a dreadnought falls in battle, it represents both an opportunity and a challenge for the Orcs, though they lack the awareness to truly appreciate what they've captured. To them, it's a big walking weapon platform. It's got armor thicker than a tank. It's got guns that can blow holes in fortress walls. It can crush Orcs with its power fist and shrug off shots that would destroy lighter vehicles. In short, it's exactly the kind of thing that triggers every looting instinct in the Orc psyche. The mech boys see it and immediately start thinking about what they could do with it. Make it shootier, make it choppier, paint it red so it goes faster, even though dreadnoughts don't actually go that fast. Add more guns, more armor, more spikes, more everything. What they don't understand, what they cannot understand because their minds don't work that way, is that a dreadnought isn't just a machine. There's someone inside, a living, conscious being trapped within that sarcophagus, kept alive by systems the Orcs will blunder through with all the delicacy of an avalanche. They don't grasp the sacred nature of what they've captured, the centuries or millennia of service represented by the warrior inside, the bonds of brotherhood connecting him to his chapter. To them, it's just loot. Really good loot, but just loot. Now let us construct the scenario that leads to capture. Picture Espandor, that forested cardinal world on the edge of Ultramar's territory. Its two continents are covered in ancient trees, broken only by carefully planned cities that blend into the natural landscape according to Guilliman's principles of harmonious development. The population is smaller than the more developed core worlds of Ultramar, but they are proud people, descendants of explorers who settled here during the Age of Strife and have maintained their independence and unique culture even while embracing their place in Ultramar's order. The Orcs arrived without warning, as they often do. Perhaps they were drawn by the psychic wake of a nearby weg that had ravaged other systems. Perhaps they were simply wandering warbands that stumbled upon Espandor and decided it looked like a good place for a fight. Perhaps a war boss had specifically targeted the world as part of a larger campaign against Ultramar. The reason doesn't particularly matter. What matters is that thousands, then tens of thousands, then hundreds of thousands of Orcs descended upon Espandor in crude spacecraft and rock transports, massive asteroids, hollowed out and filled with Orcs that were simply dropped from orbit to crater into the surface. The Ultramarines responded with their characteristic efficiency and tactical brilliance. The Fourth Company, perhaps led by a captain who had studied the Orc invasion scenarios detailed in the Codex Astartes, deployed to reinforce the planetary defense forces. With them came several ancient ones, dreadnoughts, whose experience with Orc combat stretched back centuries. Among them, let us imagine, was Brother Castus, a venerable dreadnought who had served the chapter for 600 years since his interment, after suffering catastrophic wounds fighting word-bearers during a border war in the galactic East. He had walked through the fires of a dozen campaigns. His assault cannon had spoken the Emperor's wrath to countless enemies. His power fist had crushed the skulls of alien war bosses and heretic commanders. He was, by any measure, a hero of the chapter. The initial battles went well. The Ultramarines struck at the Orc landing zones with precise drop pod assaults and lightning-fast attacks by assault marines. They targeted the biggest Orcs, knowing that removing leadership would fracture the horde into infighting mobs. They used the terrain masterfully, turning the forests of Espandor into killing grounds where disciplined fire could cut down waves of Orc boys charging between the trees. Brother Castus's assault cannon became a focal point of many defenses, his withering fire creating fields of Orc corpses that slowed subsequent waves. The Ultramarines held their ground, adapted to Orc tactics, and fought with the skill that made them the exemplars of the Adeptus Astartes. But Orcs have one advantage that even the Ultramarines struggle to counter: numbers. For every Orc that fell, it seemed like 3 more appeared. The Wag field grew stronger as more greenskins gathered on Espandor, drawn by the promise of the best fight in the sector. Battles that should have been victories became Pyrrhic struggles. Positions that should have held for days fell in hours. The Ultramarines never broke, never routed, never showed fear, but they were being ground down by attrition that even their superior skill and equipment couldn't fully offset. The Battle of Valorin Pass became the turning point. The Ultramarines had established a defensive line in a river valley, using the natural terrain to create overlapping fields of fire. The Orcs, led by a particularly brutal war boss riding a Gargant, a towering war machine the size of an Imperial Titan, launched a massive assault. Thousands of boys charged forward, while Def Dreads and Killer Khans provided fire support. The sky darkened with Orc aircraft dropping bombs with typical accuracy, which is to say they hit friend and foe alike. Brother Castus stood in the center of the line, his assault cannon speaking a continuous roar of thunder, cutting down Orcs by the score. The line held for 6 hours, then 8, then 12. Castus's ammunition reserves ran low, and his assault cannon fell silent, replaced entirely by his power fist as he waded into melee combat, crushing Orcs with each sweep of his adamantium limb. Around him, battle brothers fought with chainswords and combat knives when their bolters ran dry. The dead piled so high that new Orcs had to climb over corpses to reach the Ultramarines' position. But still they came. Always they came. When the Gargant finally reached the Ultramarine line, it simply walked through it. Mega cannons on its arms fired at point-blank range, blowing apart defensive positions that had withstood everything else. Its massive feet crushed battle brothers and Orcs alike. Brother Castus turned to engage it, and for a moment, it seemed possible that even this monstrous war machine could be brought down. His power fist struck the Gargant's leg joint, tearing through meters of welded armor plate. Inside the Gargant, dozens of Orcs panicked as their machine stumbled. But there were too many of them, and Gargants don't go down easily. The Gargant kicked. It wasn't sophisticated. It wasn't tactical. It was just a massive metal foot swinging at the thing that had hurt it. Brother Castus, despite 600 years of combat experience, despite superhuman reflexes enhanced by his connection to the Dreadnought systems, despite everything, couldn't dodge. The impact lifted his entire chassis off the ground and sent him crashing into the remains of a stone fortification 20 meters away. His armor cracked, his systems screamed warnings, his neural link flickered, and then the Orcs were on him, dozens of them, stabbing and hacking and wrenching at his armor, trying to pull him apart. The last thing Brother Castus's external sensors recorded before they went dark was the Ultramarine line finally breaking, his brothers conducting a fighting withdrawal, leaving the dead and the critically damaged behind because staying meant dying for nothing. In his mind, through the pain and the system failures, he tried to cry out, "Don't leave me, brothers, please." But his Vox was offline, his weapons were offline, everything was offline. He felt the Orcs dragging him, felt them hooking chains to his broken armor, felt them hauling him like a prize animal. And then, mercy of mercies, his consciousness faded into the emergency hibernation that occurs when a dreadnought's systems suffer catastrophic damage. Darkness claimed him, and for a time, there was nothing. When awareness returned, it came in fragments. First, sound. The crash and clang of metal on metal. Orc voices, guttural and loud, barking orders and insults in their crude tongue. The whir of power tools, the hiss of welding torches. Then, sensation. Not physical sensation, because he had no physical body to speak of anymore, but the data his remaining senses provided. He was in a large space, hot, the air thick with smoke and oil. His chassis was stationary, held in place by crude but effective restraints. Then, vision. His optical sensors came partially online, providing grainy, flickering images. He could see. Emperor help him. He could see where he was. The workshop of an orc mech boy. Scrap metal everywhere. Vehicles in various states of disassembly and reconstruction. Gretchen running between piles of parts, carrying tools and components, and around him, dozens of orcs. Some were working on him directly, others were just watching, pointing and laughing and shouting suggestions. And at the center of it all, a big mech, identifiable by his larger size and the wealth of mechanical augmentations covering his body. Brother Castus tried to access his systems, tried to activate weapons, tried to move, tried anything. Nothing responded. The orcs had been thorough in their initial assessment, disabling everything that could threaten them while they worked. He couldn't fight. He couldn't escape. He couldn't even speak to tell them what they had, what they were doing, though they wouldn't have understood or cared. He could only watch, only observe his own desecration with the detachment of his mechanical senses. The big mech circled Castus's chassis, examining it from every angle with an expression that might have been appreciation or might have been hunger. It was hard to tell with orcs. The greenskin reached out with a crude mechanical claw that replaced one of his hands and tapped the sarcophagus housing Castus's body. The sound reverberated through Castus's audio sensors. Then the mech started barking orders. The Gretchen swarmed forward with tools. The work began. They started with the iconography, the ultramarine symbols, the ultima, the proud blue and gold livery. All of it had to go in the orc aesthetic. Grots with sanders and grinders assaulted his armor, removing paint in harsh strokes that left scratches in the ceramite beneath. Others followed with brushes and buckets of paint, slapping on colors with no technique or care. Red dominated, because red goes faster, though Castus's dreadnought chassis had never been designed for speed. Yellow accents for bigger booms, the mech had decided. Blue symbols for luck. They didn't remove everything evenly. Patches of ultramarine blue remained, showing through the crude paint job like bruises. His name, carefully inscribed in high Gothic on his sarcophagus, disappeared under layers of red paint and crude orc glyphs. The purity seals that had adorned his chassis, each one placed there by a chaplain and blessed with prayers, were simply torn off. The Grots threw them into a pile of other useless bits, all the sacred items that meant nothing to orcs. Servo skulls that had hovered near him during battles, destroyed in the fighting at Valorin Pass, were replaced with crude orc totems and trophies. Teeth, the currency of orc society made from their own constantly regenerating tusks, were nailed and glued to his armor as decorations. Chains with dangling bits of scrap metal were welded on. Everything about his appearance that spoke of the Ultramarines, of Ultramar, of the Imperium, was stripped away or covered over. Through it all, Brother Castus could do nothing but witness. He had no voice to protest, no hand to strike, no way to end his own existence and deny the orcs their prize. He was a consciousness trapped in a tomb, and the tomb was being desecrated before his senses. Every scrape of the grinder sent vibrations through his chassis that his neural interface interpreted as something uncomfortably close to pain. Every splash of crude paint felt like a violation. He had served the chapter for 600 years. He had earned his rest in the sleep between battles, had earned the reverence of his brothers. had earned the right to continue serving until glorious destruction claimed him. Instead, he was becoming something monstrous. The mech eventually turned his attention to the weapons systems. Castus's assault cannon, that beautiful piece of technology that had slain so many enemies, was apparently insufficiently orky. The big mech examined it, grunted, then started ordering its removal. The careful mounting brackets that allowed for precise targeting were cut away with welding torches. The ammunition feed system, a marvel of engineering that ensured the weapon never jammed, was ripped out. The barrel assembly came off, and for a moment, Castus dared to hope they would simply replace it with something that wouldn't work, that would fail when they tried to fire it, that would deny them the use of their prize. But mech boys, for all their crude methods, have that genetic engineering instinct. The big mech selected a massive orc weapon, something that looked like it had been built from a dozen different guns welded together, with ammunition belts crisscrossing its surface and what might have been a flamethrower attached to the bottom. With brutal efficiency, the orcs modified Castus's weapon mount to accept this monstrosity. They didn't bother with targeting systems or fire control. They just bolted it on, rigged up a crude firing mechanism, and called it good. When they tested it, firing a burst into the ceiling of the workshop and bringing down a shower of debris that sent Gretchen scurrying for cover, it worked. Orc technology at its finest. The Power Fist proved more resistant to their modifications, simply because it was a solid piece of adamantium that even orcs couldn't easily take apart. But they could add to it. Spikes got welded onto the fingers. A buzzsaw blade was attached to the forearm. Additional armor plates, torn from some other vehicle and covered in orc glyphs, were bolted onto the fist's housing. They even attached a small scorcher, a crude flamethrower, to the wrist. Because why not have more weapons? The elegant, brutal simplicity of the original Power Fist disappeared under layers of orc improvements. Days passed, maybe weeks. Castus had no way to track time with his chronometer systems offline. The work continued. They opened panels in his chassis, poked around in his internal systems with Gretchen hands and mech tools, not understanding what they were looking at, but making changes anyway. They found his power source, a plasma reactor that had hummed quietly for 600 years, with minimal maintenance. The big mech stared at it for a long time, clearly recognizing that it was important, but not entirely understanding how it worked. He left it mostly intact, but added supplementary power feeds from orc sources, just in case. These feeds were inefficient, prone to overloading, and fundamentally incompatible with Castus's systems, but the WAG field would make them work regardless. The worst moment, the absolute nadir of this nightmare, came when the mech discovered the sarcophagus itself. He'd clearly been wondering what was in the armored box at the center of the chassis, and eventually curiosity overcame whatever caution he possessed. With a massive pry bar, the big mech forced open the outer casing. Castus felt the pressure on his tomb, felt the seals breaking, felt the sanctity of his final resting place being violated. His audio sensors picked up the hiss of escaping preservative fluids, felt the temperature change as the carefully controlled internal environment was exposed to the filthy air of the workshop. The orcs stared at what they found. Castus couldn't see himself, but he knew what they were looking at. What remained of his body, sustained by the sarcophagus's systems. A torso, perhaps part of his head, wrapped in neural interface cables and life support tubes. What might have once been recognizable as human, as a space marine, now reduced to biological components necessary to house the consciousness that piloted this machine. The orcs made sounds that might have been disgust, or might have been fascination. The mech reached in with a crude instrument, poking at the cables, and Castus felt it through his whole being. Not physical pain, because those nerve endings no longer existed or no longer functioned in the traditional sense, but awareness of violation, of something fundamentally wrong occurring to the most intimate part of his existence. The big mech seemed to understand, in his limited way, that the thing in the box was important. He didn't rip out the cables or smash the life support systems. Instead, he had his Gretchen clean up the spilled fluids, seal some of the gaps with crude welding, and patch the sarcophagus back together. The repairs were horrific to contemplate. All angular welds and mismatched metal, nothing like the precision work of Imperial tech marines. But they held. The systems continued functioning, kept functioning, would keep functioning for the Emperor only knew how long. Castus would not be granted even the mercy of system failure and death. He would continue, trapped, aware, as these monsters completed their work. More weapons were added. A rocket launcher, because every good Orc vehicle needs missiles, mounted on his shoulder joint, where it interfered with his chassis's rotation. Big shooters on his hips. A grabbing claw, essentially a giant mechanical hand, attached to the spot where another weapon might have gone. The mech seemed to be operating under the principle that if a spot could fit a weapon, it should have a weapon. That the systems would be impossible to use simultaneously, that the targeting would be a nightmare, that the added weight would make movement difficult. None of these concerns mattered. More Dakar, always more Dakar. The paint job continued. Layers of red, yellow and blue covered every surface. Orc glyphs, crude and angular, were painted wherever space allowed. The mech's personal symbol, marking this as his work, went on the sarcophagus itself. Teeth and chains and bits of scrap metal got attached as decoration. The Orcs seemed to delight in making the dreadnought, their dreadnought now in their minds, look as mean and aggressive as possible. Some of the additions serve no purpose whatsoever. Metal plates welded on at odd angles, spikes pointing in directions that couldn't possibly threaten an enemy, chains that did nothing except hang there and rattle when the chassis moved. But to the Orcs, all of it made sense. All of it made the machine better, tougher, killier. They even modified the base and legs, though dreadnought locomotion systems are notoriously robust and difficult to alter. Where Castus had once walked with measured, powerful steps, now his movement would be lurching and uneven, thanks to mismatched repair work on his damaged leg joints. The Orcs added armor plates to his lower limbs that actually made them heavier and slower. They welded on what appeared to be exhaust pipes that led nowhere, but would presumably belch smoke when active, because smoke makes things look tougher. Everything about the modifications demonstrated the Orc philosophy that more is better, and subtlety is for gits who can't afford more guns. Throughout this process, Brother Castus's consciousness remained trapped in his nightmare. He couldn't sleep. The hibernation systems that normally provided mercy between battles were offline or inaccessible. He was awake for every moment, every modification, every desecration. He tried to distract himself by remembering his service before the dreadnought, his youth as a scout, learning the skills that would serve him throughout his service, his initiation into the tactical squads, his first taste of full battle brother status, the campaigns he'd fought in his living body, the brothers he'd served alongside, the victories they'd achieved in the Emperor's name. But these memories felt increasingly distant, increasingly unreal. The present overwhelmed everything. The constant noise of the workshop, the lurching in his systems every time the Orcs made another modification, the helplessness. In his centuries as a dreadnought, Castus had been powerful. He had been respected. He had been a hero, an ancient one whose counsel was sought and whose mere presence inspired. Now he was reduced to this, a toy for monsters who couldn't even comprehend what they had, a prize so thoroughly violated that he didn't know if he could ever be recovered, even if rescue came. How could he return to his brothers looking like this? How could he face them knowing he'd been made into this obscenity? He tried to hold on to his faith. The Emperor protects, the old saying went. But the Emperor had not protected him from this. He tried to remember the teachings of the Codex Astartes, that sacred text penned by his own Primarch. But the Codex said nothing about enduring conscious entombment in a defiled shell, while Orcs turned you into a weapon against your own kind. He tried to think of Guilliman, that exemplar of rationality and tactical genius. What would the Primarch say about this situation? Perhaps something about accepting what cannot be changed and focusing on what can be influenced. But Castus could influence nothing. He could only endure. Time became meaningless. The workshop's cycle of work and rest, of frantic activity and periodic lulls, provided no actual measure of duration. The orcs didn't care about human concepts of hours and days. They worked when they felt like working, slept when they felt like sleeping, and stopped to eat or fight amongst themselves when the mood struck. The big mech maintained focus on his project better than his underlings, returning again and again to examine his work, to add more modifications, to bark orders at Gretchen who were installing components incorrectly. Eventually, inevitably, the work reached a state the big mech considered finished. This didn't mean everything worked perfectly. Orc construction is never perfect. There would be pieces left over that nobody could identify, parts that didn't quite fit but were forced into place anyway, systems that probably shouldn't be connected but were. None of that mattered. The big mech stood back, looked at what he'd created, and nodded with satisfaction. He'd taken Space Marine technology and made it orky. He'd created something that would smash and blast and stomp, and everyone would know it was his creation. That was victory enough. The testing phase proved as chaotic as the construction. The orcs fired up Castus's systems, and he felt power flooding through his chassis for the first time since the battle at Valorin Pass. But everything was wrong. The power feeds were irregular, surging and dropping. The weapon systems had no proper targeting integration. The movement controls, already damaged in battle, had been modified to the point where they barely responded to his neural inputs. When they tried to make him walk, the dreadnought lurched forward in an unsteady gait that threatened to topple it onto the watching orcs. They laughed. Of course they laughed. To them, the stumbling war machine was hilarious. They tested the weapons next, and the workshop erupted in chaos. The modified assault cannon equivalent roared to life, spewing shells in a wide arc that killed several Gretchen and sent everyone diving for cover. The rocket launcher misfired, the missile spiraling wildly before impacting a pile of scrap and causing a secondary explosion. The Scorcher worked perfectly, unfortunately, belching a gout of flame that ignited an oil spill and started a fire that took the orcs several minutes to extinguish. Through it all, Castus remained trapped in the pilot's seat of this mad creation, unable to control what his weapons did, even as they fired under orc commands. The big mech seemed pleased with the destruction. To an orc, weapons that caused chaos were good weapons. That they'd nearly killed the entire work crew was irrelevant. That they'd damaged the workshop was acceptable losses. The important thing was that the war machine functioned after a fashion. The mech slapped a hand against Castus's armored hull, the clang reverberating through the chassis, and declared his work complete. The looted dreadnought would march to war. But before we follow Castus into battle, we must address the question of rescue. The Ultramarines do not abandon their own lightly. When Battle Company withdrew from Valorin Pass, the Master of the Fourth would have been counting losses. He would have noted which battle brothers failed to rejoin the force, which equipment was left behind. And he would have recorded that Brother Castus, venerable ancient of the Fourth Company, had fallen and his chassis had not been recovered. This information would have reached the chapter command quickly. The initial response would have been fury. Cold, calculated ultramarine fury directed at the orcs who had overrun their position and taken one of their ancient ones. The orcs themselves would neither know nor care about the significance, but the ultramarines would. Immediately, resources would be diverted toward recovery operations. If Castus had fallen in a temporary defeat, if the ultramarines had maintained control of the overall battlefield, recovery would have been swift. Drop pods would have delivered assault marines to the site within hours. Even in death, Castus would have been returned to his chapter, his remains treated with reverence, and his gene seed harvested if possible. But in this scenario, recovery proved impossible. The orcs had swept over the battlefield so thoroughly, had pushed the ultramarines back so far that the area remained under greenskin control. Reconnaissance missions revealed thousands of orcs swarming through the forests near Valorin Pass, looting everything they could carry. Somewhere in that chaotic mass was Castus, or what remained of him. Launching a recovery operation would have meant committing substantial forces that were desperately needed to stabilize other fronts. The decision fell to the company master: attempt recovery or accept the loss. We can imagine the debate in the chapter command. The chaplains would have argued for immediate recovery, citing the sacred nature of dreadnoughts and the need to never abandon the fallen. The Tech Marines would have pointed out that every hour Castus remained in Orc hands increased the chances of irreversible damage to his chassis and systems. The captain would have considered tactical realities, the bigger picture of the campaign, the risk versus the potential reward. In the end, pragmatism likely won. The campaign to drive the Orcs from Espandor took precedence over recovering a single fallen warrior, even one as honored as Brother Castus. The decision was made to continue the larger battle and attempt recovery once strategic situation stabilized. But stabilization took longer than anyone expected. The Orcs proved resilient, numerous, and unwilling to give up their prize world. Weeks turned into months. The Ultramarines achieved victories, pushed the Orcs back from major population centers, protected the critical infrastructure that makes a world valuable to the Imperium. But the Greenskins remained on Espandor, dug into remote regions, constantly reinforced by new warbands arriving from other systems. The window for quick recovery closed. The chances of finding Castus, let alone recovering him intact, diminished to nearly nothing. Unknown to the Ultramarines, their brother was undergoing his transformation not in some remote forest camp where mobile Orcs might have dragged him, but in a more permanent settlement. The Orc presence on Espandor had grown substantial enough that mechs had established proper workshops. These crude facilities weren't going anywhere quickly, but tracking them through the vast forests proved nearly impossible without committing overwhelming reconnaissance resources. The Ultramarines searched. Every patrol kept sensors active for signs of dreadnought power signatures. Every interrogation of captured Orcs included questions about looted Space Marine equipment. But Orcs are notoriously unreliable sources of information, even when they cooperate, which they rarely do. There was one near miss. A strike force of scouts, infiltrating deep into Orc-held territory, detected a power signature consistent with a dreadnought reactor. They called in support, and a full company moved to the location. The raid hit the Orc workshop with devastating precision. Dozens of Orcs died in the first minutes. The workshop burned. But when the Ultramarines searched the ruins, they found only pieces of a looted Imperial Guard Sentinel, its power cell registering similar energy outputs to their target. Castus was elsewhere, his signature masked by the hundreds of engines and generators in the Orc settlement, or simply missed in the vast expanse of territory to search. The psychological impact on the chapter cannot be understated. Every Space Marine knows that death can come at any moment. They accept this, they train for it, they welcome it, in a sense, as proof that they died doing their duty. But this was different. One of their ancient ones, a hero who had already sacrificed so much, was out there somewhere, possibly still alive and trapped in his sarcophagus. The chaplains held services of remembrance, but they couldn't offer the finality that death would provide. Brother Castus existed in a state of uncertainty, neither confirmed dead nor successfully recovered. It gnawed at the chapter's collective consciousness. The Fourth Company maintained the hunt even as they fought other battles. Every operation in Orc-controlled areas included secondary objectives to locate Castus or gather intelligence on his whereabouts. Marines swore personal oaths to bring their Ancient One home. The Tech Marines prepared for the worst, readying the tools and replacement parts that would be needed to restore him if recovery proved successful. The chapter serfs prepared the sacred oils and incense that would be used in reconsecration ceremonies. Everyone held on to hope, though that hope diminished with each passing week. Meanwhile, Castus experienced something close to despair. He had heard nothing from his chapter. He couldn't know that they were searching for him, that they hadn't forgotten, that the entire Fourth Company considered his recovery a matter of honor. From his perspective, Trapped in silence with no communication capabilities, he had been abandoned. Lost to the chapter. Forgotten in the chaos of war. The thought hurt worse than the physical modifications the orcs had inflicted. He had served for 600 years. He had given everything to the Ultramarines, and now he would spend whatever time remained to him as this mockery, this abomination, this thing the orcs had created. He contemplated ending his own existence. If his life support systems could be sabotaged, if the reactor could be overloaded, if any of a dozen catastrophic failures could be induced, he might achieve the death that battle had denied him. But he had no control. The orcs had disabled everything, rewired everything. Even his limited ability to influence his own systems was gone. He was purely passenger now, consciousness inhabiting a machine he could not command. The only mercy was that when they powered down his systems between modifications, when his consciousness faded into dormancy, he found something resembling peace. But the orcs never left him dormant for long. There was always more work to do, more testing to conduct, more modifications to try. Finally, the day came when the big mech declared it was time to see his creation in battle. The WAG was moving to a new battlefield, a major push against one of Espandor's fortress cities. Every available unit was being mobilized, and the mech wanted his looted dreadnought there to show the other mechs what he'd accomplished. Castus was loaded onto a crude transport, essentially a flatbed truck with additional armor plates welded on. Other orcs piled onto the vehicle around him, hanging off the sides, standing on his chassis, treating him as mobile cover. The transport roared to life with a cloud of black exhaust and lurched toward the battle. The journey provided Castus his first view of the outside world in however long his captivity had lasted. His optical sensors, partially restored during the modification process, showed him the landscape of Espandor. The forests he remembered, now torn and damaged by orc presence. Trees knocked down to clear paths for vehicles. Crude structures built from salvaged materials and loot. Everywhere, orcs. Thousands of them, streaming toward the battle in a great green migration. They rode in vehicles of every description, from nimble buggies to massive battle wagons. They flew overhead in ramshackle aircraft that belched smoke and fire. The scale of the WAG was stunning. No wonder the Ultramarines had struggled to contain this invasion. As they approached the battle zone, the sounds of war grew louder. The thunder of artillery, the crack of small arms fire, the distinctive bark of bolters. The Ultramarines were here, defending this city against the green tide, and Castus was being brought to fight against them. The horror of his situation crystallized in that moment. He would be deployed as a weapon against his own brothers. The orcs would activate his systems, would use his guns to shoot at Ultramarines, would send him shambling across the battlefield toward the very warriors who had once looked to him for guidance and inspiration. He tried to find some way to warn them, any method of communication. If he could just activate a distress beacon, send out a signal on Ultramarine frequencies, let them know that he was here and hostile, that they should destroy him rather than attempt capture or disabling. But again, he had no control. His communication systems remained locked down or had been rewired so extensively that they no longer functioned as intended. He was silent, helpless, a ghost in his own machine. The transport crashed through the final tree line and emerged onto the battlefield. The fortress city of Helion spread before them, its walls scarred but intact, its towers bristling with defensive weapons. And on those walls, in blue and gold armor, stood Ultramarines. Castus recognized the markings of the 4th Company. His company, brothers he had fought beside, advised, protected. They were here, and he was out here, on the wrong side of this battle. The transport stopped, and the orcs began piling off, eager for the fight. The big mech approached Castus's chassis and activated the control systems he'd rigged up, overriding whatever remained of the original controls. Power flooded through Castus's body. Weapons came online. The modified assault cannon hummed with readiness. The rocket launcher's targeting systems, crude as they were, began scanning for targets. And the locomotion systems engaged, forcing his legs to move, forcing his chassis to turn toward the enemy, toward his brothers. The orcs were screaming with joy, firing their guns in the air, charging forward. And in the middle of them, lurching along on damaged legs, painted in orc colors and bristling with crude weapons, came the thing that had once been Brother Castus, venerable ancient of the Fourth Company, now just another piece of looted war gear. The Ultramarines saw him coming. They couldn't have missed him. A dreadnought-sized target, even one modified beyond recognition, draws attention on any battlefield. Through his sensors, Castus watched as Battle Brothers adjusted their aim, targeted him specifically. Part of him desperately wanted them to fire, to put him down, to end this nightmare. But he also knew they would hesitate. They would wonder if one of their ancient ones could possibly be inside. They would want to disable rather than destroy, to capture rather than kill. That hesitation, that mercy, would cost them. The big mech activated the weapons. The modified assault cannon roared, spewing shells in the general direction of the Ultramarine lines. The accuracy was terrible, nothing like the precision Castus had once achieved. But volume of fire mattered more to orcs than accuracy. Some of the shells found targets, impacting on the fortress walls, on defensive positions, possibly on the Marines themselves. The rocket launcher fired next, its missiles spiraling through the air before impacting somewhere in the city. Castus felt every shot like a betrayal, like he was personally pulling the trigger, even though he had no control whatsoever. The return fire came quickly. Bolter rounds pinged off his armor. Lascannon shots scorched deep furrows in his chassis. A missile struck his right side, the explosion rocking his entire frame and taking several orcs near him with it. But the modifications, for all their crudeness, had actually added mass and armor. The orcs' additional plating, welded on without any real system, provided extra protection through sheer bulk. And the Wei-Ji-Yi field helped. It always helped. The shells that should have penetrated found their energy dispersed. The systems that should have failed kept functioning. Orc belief made their creation resilient. Brother Castus watched his brothers through sensors that showed them only as tactical contacts, potential targets that the crude fire control systems kept highlighting. He knew some of them would be warriors he'd fought beside in his living days, centuries ago. Others would be younger Marines who had grown up hearing stories about ancient Castus, learning from recordings of his council. All of them would be devastated to learn what had happened to him. If he could just override the systems, just take control for a moment, he could turn his weapons on the orcs around him. He could destroy himself in a way that took as many greenskins as possible with him. He could die as an Ultramarine should, but his consciousness remained separated from control, a passenger viewing his own actions with horror. The dreadnought lurched forward, closing the distance to the Ultramarine positions. Orc boys used him as cover, hiding behind his bulk as they advanced. The big mech stayed close, one hand on the control mechanism, directing his creation like a puppeteer. When they got close enough, the melee weapons engaged. The Power Fist, still functional beneath its orc modifications, swung at a defensive barrier. The impact shattered Ferrocrete and killed an Imperial Guard trooper who had been taking cover there. The buzzsaw, attached to his forearm by orc ingenuity, screamed to life and bit into another defensive position. This was hell. This was worse than death. Castus had imagined many ends for himself, destroyed by a lucky shot from a powerful enemy, worn down over millennia until his systems finally failed, even catastrophic destruction that vaporized him in an instant. All of those would have been preferable to this, to be used as a weapon against the Imperium, against Ultramar, against his own chapter. To have his very existence, his 600 years of service, twisted into this obscenity. He would have wept if he still possessed the biological capability for tears. The battle raged for hours. The orcs threw themselves at the Helion defenses with typical disregard for casualties. They died by the thousands, their bodies piling up in front of the walls, but thousands more kept coming. Castus remained in the thick of it, an unwilling participant in the slaughter. His weapons fired when the mechs commanded. His fists struck when the orcs steered him into melee. Several times, ultramarine fire found critical spots, damaged components, caused system failures. Each time, Gretchen swarmed over him, performing field repairs with whatever materials they had on hand. Scrap metal got welded over breaches. Duct tape, actual duct tape, held together systems that should have required precision maintenance, and it worked. The Warhammer field and orc belief kept him in the fight. Then came the moment that would haunt whatever remained of his consciousness. An ultramarine assault squad deployed from the walls. Jump-pack troops coming down behind the orc lines to disrupt their advance. They targeted the looted dreadnought specifically, correctly identifying it as a major threat and possibly recognizing it as one of their own. The sergeant leading them landed directly in front of Castus, his power fist crackling with energy. For just a moment, they were face to face, or as close as a dreadnought and a marine can be. The sergeant paused, just a fraction of a second, and Castus saw recognition in that pause. This marine knew. He suspected. The marking might have been covered, but the basic chassis shape, the size, something gave it away. The sergeant's hesitation cost him. The big mech activated Castus's power fist before the marine could strike. The blow caught the sergeant in his side, the force of it shattering ceramite armor and crushing the flesh beneath. The ultramarine fell, and his battle brothers descended in fury on the dreadnought that had struck him down. But it was too late. The damage was done. Castus had struck down a son of Ultramar, not intentionally, not willingly, but his body, his frame, his weapon had dealt the killing blow. Inside his sarcophagus, in the darkness that housed what remained of his biological form, something broke. Some final thread of hope, or resistance, or sanity simply gave way. The assault marines damaged Castus severely in their vengeance. They tore off his rocket launcher, ripped apart his secondary weapons, damaged his locomotion systems to the point where his left leg barely functioned. But they didn't destroy him completely. Either their ammunition ran low, or reinforcements forced them to withdraw, or some other